My mom and unemployed sister are trying to take 80% of my father's inheritance. They nearly ruined his business's reputation and now accuse me of embezzlement. I'm 32, and this has been one of the hardest weeks of my life. My dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack, and on top of grieving, I'm forced to deal with ugly family drama. Never in a million years did I think I'd face something like this at my age, but here we are. My parents divorced when I was 15, and it was brutal. My mom cheated on my dad with his best friend, which tore our family apart. My younger sister, Emmy, she's 28 now, sided with mom. I chose to live with dad, and things were never the same between us again. Dad was a self-made businessman. He started with a tiny electronics repair shop in our garage when I was a kid. I still remember spending weekends helping him sort parts and study circuit diagrams. Over the years, he grew that little shop into a chain of stores across the state. His story always inspired me. He worked relentlessly and achieved everything through grit and perseverance. After the divorce, he buried himself even more in work. I think it was his way of coping with the betrayal. Many nights I'd wake up and find him hunched over spreadsheets at 2 a.m. planning new strategies. Despite the long hours, he always made time for me. We had breakfast together every morning, and he never missed a single school event. Eventually, he remarried a wonderful woman named Susan. She never tried to replace my mom, but she was kind, supportive, and a true partner for my dad. They traveled, volunteered, and seemed genuinely happy together. It made me feel good to see him smiling again. Meanwhile, mom's life went downhill. Her fling with dad's ex-best friend didn't last, and since then she's been struggling financially. She always claimed dad cheated her in the divorce, but from what I know, the settlement was fair. He even let her keep the family home, which she later had to sell because of her own poor money management. Over the years, she bounced from one job to another: real estate, retail, catering. Every time she started with enthusiasm, but gave up as soon as things got difficult. Emmy followed the same path, dropped out of college, hopped from job to job, talked about big dreams but never saw them through. She leaned on mom financially and emotionally, and together they lived in this strange bubble of resentment against my dad. Yesterday, we held dad's funeral. It was heartbreaking, but also overwhelming to see how many people came to pay their respects. The church was packed with colleagues, employees, and people from the community who admired him. I gave the eulogy, sharing stories about his kindness, work ethic, and the lessons he taught me about honesty, resilience, and helping others. Speaking through the tears was hard, but I wanted to honor him properly. What stunned me was that mom and Emmy showed up. They hadn't spoken to dad in years. They sat in the very back whispering to each other. At first I was glad they came, but later I overheard them talking, and what I heard made me sick. Mom said, "Now's our chance to finally get what we deserve." Emmy nodded, saying they should fight for at least 80% of the inheritance. Their plan? Challenge the will, claim dad wasn't of sound mind, and argue that mom supported him for years while he built the business. I couldn't believe it. We were literally standing in the church at his funeral, and they were already plotting to grab his money? Dad always taught me to work for what you earn, and here they were scheming to steal what wasn't theirs. It felt like betrayal not just of me, but of everything he stood for. I wanted to confront them right then, but I held back. It was Dad's funeral, not the place for a scene. Instead, I kept quiet and decided to stay alert. In the days after, I noticed Mom and Emmy acting suspiciously sweet towards Susan, completely unlike them. They were trying to win her over, hoping she'd soften. I even caught Emmy snooping around Dad's office, pretending to look for family photos, but obviously searching for documents to use in court. Yesterday, we finally sat down with Dad's lawyer for the reading of the will. Susan was quiet, still shaken from losing him. Mom and Emmy kept shifting in their seats, glancing at each other nervously. I tried to keep my face neutral, though inside I knew exactly what they were hoping for. As expected, Dad left the business to me, since I'd worked alongside him for years and understood it best. Susan inherited the house and a large portion of his savings.
He also made several charity donations, true to his values. And Mom? Emmy? They weren't even mentioned. My mom and sister only got symbolic amounts, $10,000 each. The moment the lawyer finished reading the will, my mother exploded. She started yelling about how unfair it was, how she had supported my father for years while he built his company, and how she deserved a bigger share. Conveniently, she left out the part where her affair destroyed their marriage. Emmy jumped in right after, claiming it wasn't right that I inherited so much, since I had already benefited by living with Dad after the divorce. She accused him of favoritism, saying he punished her just because she sided with Mom back then. It was obvious they had rehearsed this whole performance. That's when I snapped. I told them I had overheard their little scheme at the funeral. I called them out for plotting to contest the will and trying to take advantage of the situation. I said they should be ashamed of themselves, thinking only about money while the rest of us were grieving. Mom tried to backpedal, saying she didn't understand how hard things were for her after the divorce. She painted herself as a victim, glossing over the fact that she squandered everything she got in the settlement. Emmy accused me of always taking Dad's side and never caring about them. But I stood my ground. I reminded them how they treated Dad all those years, cutting him off, rejecting his attempts at reconciliation. I pointed out that he didn't owe them anything. The fact that he left them even a token amount was proof of his generosity.
The meeting ended with Mom and Emmy storming out, threatening to bring in lawyers. Susan broke down crying from the stress. The attorney reassured us that the will was solid and very hard to challenge, but he warned that if they did file a lawsuit, things could get ugly and drag on for a long time. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Relatives keep reaching out with their opinions. Some are on my side, saying Mom and Emmy are just being greedy and that Dad had every right to decide what happened with his estate. Others say I'm being too harsh and should try to see their perspective. A few even suggested I hand over part of my inheritance for the sake of peace in the family, but I refuse. Dad worked himself to the bone for everything he built. He alone had the right to decide how his estate would be divided. Mom forfeited any claim the day she cheated and walked away. Emmy chose her side back then, and she barely had any relationship with Dad for years. I've spent the last several days digging into Dad's business records, determined to be ready in case they take this to court. From everything I can see, Mom's claims of supporting him while he built the company are exaggerated. The truth is, the business only really took off after the divorce when Dad threw himself completely into work. I also spoke with longtime employees who had been with him from the early days. They shared stories of his dedication, working nights, weekends, never slowing down. One of them, Jim, told me how Dad gave him a chance when no one else would. Jim had a criminal record from his youth and couldn't find a job anywhere, but Dad hired him as a janitor and later helped him rise all the way to store manager. There are dozens of stories like that. Dad didn't just build a company, he built opportunities for people. Hearing those stories has only strengthened my resolve to defend his legacy. He wasn't building this business for greed. He wanted to create something lasting, something that supported entire families. I can't let my mother and sister's selfishness put that at risk. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't conflicted. A part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. Should I try to compromise just to keep the peace? I don't want to go against Dad's final wishes, but the idea of a drawn-out legal battle makes me sick. It would drain money, energy, and cause even more family drama. Right now, I'm focusing on supporting Susan and keeping the company steady. Losing Dad was already devastating, and on top of that, fighting off my mom and sister's greed is exhausting. I barely sleep, constantly replaying that confrontation in my head. Part of me feels guilty for creating a scene so soon after his death, but another part of me is furious they would stoop so low. I worry most about Susan. Since the will was read, she's been almost silent, crushed by the stress. She adored my father, and watching his memory drag through mud is breaking her. The company has also been shaken. Dad was its heart and soul, and stepping into his shoes feels overwhelming. The last thing I need is a lawsuit distracting me from keeping everything afloat. I've even considered offering Mom and Emmy more money than what Dad left them, just to make them go away. But I know the risk.
that giving in might only encourage them to demand more, and most importantly, it would betray Dad's wishes. Last night, I found an old family photo album in Dad's office. One picture stopped me cold. The day of the first store's opening. Dad stood there cutting the ribbon, Mom smiling beside me, and Emmy and I clapping as little kids. We looked so happy, so proud. And I wondered, how did we end up here? How did that family turn into this? So here's my dilemma. Am I wrong for confronting my mom and sister so harshly? For standing my ground on honoring Dad's will? Should I fight this battle to the end, or try to compromise for the sake of family peace? I honestly don't know. If Mom and Emmy truly had zero chance of winning in court, part of me thought about just offering them a little more money to make them go away. Not a stake in the company, never. But if Dad left them each $10,000, maybe I'd offer 20 to 30K, just to avoid endless headaches and move on with my life. Because in the end, nerves cost more than money. But if there was any chance they could actually succeed, maybe it would take a bigger offer to settle. Still, I understood what many people, and honestly what I myself wanted deep down, felt, that Mom and Emmy deserved nothing. If the case went to trial and they lost, they'd not only walk away empty-handed, but also have to cover court costs. That would be its own kind of justice. Karma, really. Still, my own instincts told me to at least consider offering something small just to avoid a drawn-out war. Update number 1. It's been about a month since my last post. Unfortunately, I don't have good news. Things with Mom and Emmy spiraled way beyond anything I could have imagined. At this point, it feels like I'm living inside some ridiculous soap opera, except it's my actual life and there's no dramatic background music to warn me before everything collapses. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my first post. Your advice and support were a lifeline. To those who told me to stand firm, thank you. Your words helped me stay grounded. And to those who suggested compromise, I truly appreciate that perspective too. I even tried, but more on that later. So, where do I start? I guess with the lawsuit. Yep, Mom and Emmy officially hired an attorney to contest my dad's will. About a week after the reading, I was served court papers. Their lawyer has a reputation for being ruthless in inheritance battles. The lawsuit claims that Dad was not of sound mind when he wrote his will, and that Mom supposedly contributed significantly to building the business during the marriage, so much that she's entitled to most of it. They're demanding 80% of the estate, exactly what I heard them plotting at the funeral.
It's absurd. But absurd or not, it's already causing real damage. Legal fees are piling up fast. I had to hire my own lawyer. Thankfully, Tom, Dad's longtime friend and legal advisor, agreed to represent us. He knows the history of both our family and the company, which is a huge help. Even with his discounted rates, though, this isn't cheap. Tom is confident the will is airtight and that Mom and Emmy don't have a case. But he also warned me, these disputes can drag on for months, sometimes years. And the lawsuit isn't even the worst part. Mom and Emmy launched a smear campaign against me and Susan. They're spreading disgusting rumors, telling people Susan manipulated Dad into rewriting the will, that I've been embezzling money from the company for years, and that we plan to sell the business and fire everyone. Total lies, but rumors travel fast. I've spent countless hours on the phone reassuring employees that their jobs are safe. Even some of our longtime customers started asking if they should take their business elsewhere. Last week, I overheard 2 new hires whispering in the break room, wondering if they should start job hunting in case mass layoffs happen. I had to call an emergency staff meeting to squash the gossip. It kills me that it's come to this, that I have to defend both myself and my father's memory to people who worked beside him for decades. The accusation of theft especially infuriates me. Dad was meticulous about the company's finances, and he drilled that same discipline into me. The thought that I would steal from the very business he poured his life into makes my blood boil. I spent the past week going through financial records with our accountant, preparing evidence in case the claim makes it into court. Susan is struggling more than anyone. She isn't used to this level of scheming and backstabbing. At one point, she even said maybe we should give Mom and Emmy what they want just to make it stop. I had to remind her again and again that giving in is exactly what they want. The other night, I found her crying in Dad's office, clutching one of his old sweaters, the one he always wore when he worked late. Through her tears, she looked at me and asked, "Would he really want all this fighting?" My heart broke. I tried reaching out directly to Mom and Emmy, phone calls, texts, hoping to reason with them. They ignored everything. Now all communication goes through their lawyer. It feels like they've forgotten we're even family. I did run into Emmy at the store last week. I thought maybe without Mom around I could get through to her, but the second she saw me, her face went cold. She accused me of turning the family against her and stealing Dad's money. I tried to remind her how they treated him after the divorce, but she just smirked and said, "You were always Dad's golden boy." Then she walked away. It was like talking to a stranger, not the sister I grew up with. Meanwhile, the rest of the family is splitting apart. Some of my aunts and uncles are furious at Mom and Emmy and fully on my side. Others think I'm being too harsh and should just give them more money for the sake of peace. My cousin Jack even yelled at me during a family dinner, saying my stubbornness is what's tearing us apart. I left early just to avoid making a scene. That dinner was supposed to be a chance for us all to come together, remember Dad, and support each other. Instead, it turned into a battlefield. My Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister, even threw little digs about how some people forget where they come from once they get a little money. This is my life now, a nightmare I can't wake up from. Update number 2. That dinner with the family ended in total chaos. My Uncle Pete, Dad's brother, fired back at my cousin Jack, saying some people never learn to value hard work. Jack started shouting, and from there, everything just unraveled. Meanwhile, I've been throwing myself into the business, trying to keep it afloat no matter what. Dad built this company from the ground up, and I'll be damned if I let it fall apart on my watch. Thankfully, most of the employees have been amazing. Many of them have known me since I was a kid, and they keep sharing stories about Dad that helped me push through. One moment that hit me especially hard. Jim, the guy Dad once gave a second chance to, I mentioned him before, came into my office the other day carrying a stack of old photographs. They were from years of company events, picnics, Christmas parties, store openings, and in every single picture there was Dad, sleeves rolled up, working right alongside everyone else. Jim looked at me and said, "This is who your father was. This is what you're fighting for." I can't even put my words into how much that meant. But the toll is real. I barely sleep. I've lost weight. Friends keep telling me I look awful. My schedule is nothing but lawyers, paperwork, and damage control. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the exhausted, hollow-eyed man staring back at me. For a split second, I wonder if it's worth it. The worst part is the doubt. I keep asking myself, am I making the right choice? Would it be easier to just pay them off so this nightmare ends? But then I remember the look on Dad's face when he told me he was leaving the business to me. I can't betray that trust. I won't. Tom, our lawyer, reminds me constantly, this is a marathon, not a sprint. He says lawsuits like this can drag on for years, so I've started documenting everything. Every nasty rumor, every ignored call, every attempt I've made to reach out. We're also gathering testimony from longtime employees about Dad's work ethic and how the business grew after the divorce to counter Mom's ridiculous claims that she helped build it.
At the same time, I've realized I need to fight not just in court, but also in the court of public opinion. I'm planning a company-wide meeting to directly address the rumors and reassure everyone that their jobs are safe. I also intend to personally call some of our biggest clients to maintain their trust. Susan and I are even working on starting a scholarship fund in Dad's name for local kids who want to study business or electronics. We figured it's not only a way to honor his memory, but also to show the community that, like him, We believe in giving back. The response so far has been incredible. Even my old high school principal suggested we award the first scholarship at this year's graduation ceremony. It's a small light in a very dark time. As for Mom and Emmy, I've stopped trying to reason with them. If they want to communicate, it'll be through lawyers. It hurts to imagine what Dad would think, seeing his family torn apart like this. I wish I could tell you they came to their senses, that we patched things up and became one big happy family again, but that's not reality. The truth is messy, painful, and full of disappointment. For those who told me in my first post to seek compromise, I want you to know I really did try. I offered them a trust fund larger than the $10,000 Dad had originally left, but nowhere near the insane 80% they demanded. They flat out rejected it. Their counter-offer, if you can even call it that, was that they'd drop the lawsuit if I gave them 70% of the inheritance and walked away from the company entirely. When Tom told me that, I almost laughed. It's so detached from reality, it made me wonder if we even live in the same world anymore. So, here I am, preparing for a long, ugly legal war with my own mother and sister. Definitely not what I expected when we buried Dad just months ago. But this is the path, and I'm walking it. What weighs on me the most is knowing that no matter how this ends, our family will never be the same. Even if by some miracle Mom and Emmy dropped everything tomorrow, too much has been said, too many lines have been crossed. Trust is gone. Love? I don't even know if it was ever there from their side. But I'm not fighting alone. Susan has been my rock through all of this. She misses Dad, she hates the rumors, she feels the weight of the lawsuit, but she's still here, reminding me what we're fighting for whenever I start to doubt. And beyond her, I've got Dad's old friends, employees who feel more like family than blood ever did, and loyal clients reaching out to show support. Maybe that's what Dad was trying to teach me all along, that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who stand beside you, share your values, and help you be the best version of yourself. I'll write another update when I have news. In the meantime, if anyone has advice on surviving baseless lawsuits or pushing back against smear campaigns, I'm all ears. And thank you again, truly, for all the support. It means more than you know. Hopefully the next update will bring better news. Final update. What a year it's been. I kept putting off writing this last update, partly because life stayed hectic, but mostly because I wanted to be absolutely sure everything was over before sharing it with you. Now it is, and I promise to keep you in the loop, so here we go. Let's start with the lawsuit. After months of legal battles and mountains of paperwork, we finally had our day in court. It was exhausting beyond words. Mom and Emmy's lawyer pulled out every trick he had, painting Mom as the long-suffering wife who sacrificed everything for Dad's business, only to be cruelly cast aside. He even brought in so-called experts to testify about the emotional labor of a spouse being the foundation of a company's success. Theatrics were off the charts. He had Mom take the stand, telling stories about lonely nights while Dad was at the office, conveniently leaving out her affair with his best friend. But Tom, our lawyer, was ready. He presented proof of Dad's endless hours of work, employee testimonies about how the company really grew after the divorce, and financial records showing Mom had already received a fair settlement back then. He also didn't let her gloss over the affair. One of the most powerful moments came from Jim, the same employee Dad gave a second chance to. He told the court how Dad believed in him when no one else would, and how he watched firsthand as Dad's determination built the business. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, except for Mom and Emmy, who sat stone-faced like they'd swallowed something bitter. But the knockout blow came from something completely unexpected. Remember how Emmy had snooped around Dad's office after the funeral? Turns out she did find something, Dad's old journal from the divorce years. They thought it would strengthen their case, maybe show Dad's state of mind. Instead, it destroyed them. When Tom got it during discovery, it told a very different story. Pages about sleepless nights, juggling payroll, taking out a second mortgage on the house to keep the company alive. Notes about Mom's indifference to the business, her reckless spending, and yes, her affair. I'll never forget one entry Tom read aloud. Dad wrote about a night when everything was on the brink of collapse. He came home desperate to talk money, only to find Mom out partying, having spent hundreds on a new outfit. He described how alone he felt, how close he was to giving up. But then he wrote about quietly checking on me while I slept. And that moment gave him the strength to keep going. For my son, I will build a legacy he can be proud of. Hearing those words in court nearly broke me, but they also reminded me why I was fighting.
After that, things moved quickly. The judge ruled in our favor, threw out their case, and ordered Mom and Emmy to cover our legal fees. On paper, it was a total victory, but it didn't feel like joy, just relief, and a heavy sadness that it even came to this. And that wasn't the end. Remember the smear campaign they'd been running? It backfired. Some of the nastier rumors, like embezzlement and claims that we planned to sell the company, were legally deemed defamatory. We didn't sue, but the threat alone forced them to issue a public retraction. Watching them admit they'd spread lies was surreal. They looked small, defeated. Nothing like the bold, angry women who started all of this. Part of me pitied them, but mostly, I was angry for everything they'd put us through. The fallout was massive. Relatives who once doubted me, or even sided with them, turned away once the truth came out. The business, though shaken at first by the negativity, ultimately grew stronger. Employees and clients saw our transparency, our willingness to stand and fight, and it built trust instead of eroding it. We held a company-wide meeting afterward, where I laid everything out honestly and shared our plans moving forward. I was nervous people had lost faith, but when I looked around, all I saw were supportive faces. And the scholarship fund we set up in Dad's name? It's already changed lives. We've helped a dozen local kids chase their college dreams. At the first ceremony, handing out those scholarships and telling Dad's story about his belief in hard work and giving back felt like the perfect way to honor him. On a personal level, this whole ordeal has changed me. I've learned how quickly people can turn against you, but I've also learned who truly stands by your side. I found family in Susan, in our loyal employees, in the friends who never wavered, even in all of you, who listened, advised, and sent words of encouragement when I needed them most. As for Mom and Emmy, I haven't spoken to them since the verdict. Maybe I never will. That's a wound time alone won't fix. So here it is, the final chapter. Thank you for following me through this storm. Your support meant more than I can ever say. It's time to close this book and focus on building the future Dad dreamed about. This will be my last update.
I stopped a kidnapping while delivering pizza. I work as a pizza delivery driver, and one night turned into one of the strangest and most intense experiences of my life. It was a crazy shift, non-stop orders, driving all over the city without a single real break. I had been drinking water all evening because of the heat, and of course, I didn't make time to use the restroom. By the time I got close to my next delivery, the urge hit me like a truck. Luckily, I was nearly at the customer's address. I thought I'd drop the pizza off quickly, then deal with the problem. But when I pulled up, things immediately felt wrong. I'd been to that neighborhood before, even that house, but this time all the windows were dark, not even the glow of a TV inside. The entire street was eerily quiet. This was a college area, so sure, not many students were around in July, but still, somebody had ordered this pizza. I wasn't about to step out of the car and walk up to a pitch-black house. It was around 9:30 p.m., still hot outside, even though the sun had set hours ago. My car's AC barely worked, and the pizza boxes weren't helping. I called the number on the order. At first, all I heard was heavy, uneven breathing, then a shaky, "Hello?" I tried to keep it professional. "Hey, I'm outside with your pizza, but it doesn't look like anyone's home." The voice gasped, I'm not there. Not yet." Annoyed and very distracted by my full bladder, I snapped back harsher than I should have. "Well, if you're not here, I'll have to cancel the order. You were supposed to pay cash. Next time, plan better." Almost immediately, I regretted it. The voice grew clearer. It was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. Out of breath, she explained, "Oh my God, I was running home. I almost didn't hear you. I just switched off my AirPods. Is this better? I lost track of time at work, but I knew you'd be coming, so I'm literally sprinting back right now. Please, please don't leave. I'm starving and I don't have a car. Just 5 minutes, I promise." Hearing her voice jogged my memory. I had delivered here before, and she was always polite. Now I felt like a jerk for barking at her. I told her it was fine, that I'd wait, and hung up. But the bathroom situation was reaching emergency levels. No trees, no hidden corners. And like an idiot, I had tossed out an empty bottle earlier. The only option was the row of bushes by her front walkway. No lights outside, no one around, my car parked across the street, and thankfully, my job didn't require a uniform. I figured I'd be quick and no one would notice. I hurried to the thickest bush right near the front door, unzipped, and finally started to relieve myself. But almost immediately, I realized something was off. The sound wasn't right. It wasn't hitting dirt. It was solid. Before I could process it, a muffled male voice barked, "What the hell?" And a man suddenly burst out of the bush. He ran past me, wiping himself off. I must have hit him directly. My eyes adjusted enough to make out his shape, build, and clothes, but he disappeared before I could react. A minute later, I heard the screech of tires down the street. That's when it clicked. That girl had said she was running home, alone, at night, and some guy had been hiding in her bushes by the door. If I hadn't been desperate enough to relieve myself right there, I don't even want to think what might have happened. I was so stunned that I didn't even zip up. I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what the hell had just happened. The reality of it was so terrifying that my brain refused to accept it, desperately searching for some logical explanation that would make it all seem normal. I wondered maybe the bushes led to a backyard and only looked like they were up against the house. Maybe they covered an open basement window or something. But then that voice in my head screamed, "Dude, that guy was wearing a hoodie in 90-degree Fahrenheit. That is not normal. He's bad news. You're in real danger." The thought that I'd been just a couple of steps away from some man hiding in the bushes outside a young woman's home at night sent a chill down my spine. My fight-or-flight response completely broke down because instead of running, my dumb brain decided to do the absolute worst thing possible. I walked closer to investigate. There had to be a reasonable explanation, right? Some non-creepy reason for a guy in a hoodie to be crouched in the dark shrubs? I circled around, turned on my phone flashlight, and aimed it behind the bushes. But if something looks scary in the dark, trust me, shining a beam of light on it can make it 100 times worse. That's when I saw it. A bag. It was an old, beat-up drawstring backpack, a little damp from, well, yeah, I'd accidentally splashed it. Still in a fog of shock, I reached for it thinking, okay, maybe this explains it. Maybe he's homeless. Maybe he was just resting here. But when I opened the bag, reality hit me like a truck. Inside were a sharp hunting knife, a roll of duct tape, and a bottle of pills. At that moment, every illusion I'd been clinging to shattered. My body flipped into full survival mode. Adrenaline and instinct kicked in like never before. Gone was the frozen, confused idiot. I became laser-focused on one single goal: get to the car. I dropped the bag like it was on fire, bolted across the street, jumped into my car, and floored it before the door had even shut. I didn't stop until I hit a red light several blocks away. Only then did I pull over in the lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, shaking uncontrollably, trying to catch my breath. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, the first question hit me. Do I call the cops first, or the girl who lives there? I mulled it over for what felt like 10 seconds, but when I glanced at the clock, an entire hour had passed. My brain was still scrambled. Eventually, I told myself, all right, I'm safe in my locked car
with the engine running. If anything goes down, I can drive away. But she might not know what's waiting for her. So I started dialing her number. Then a horrifying thought stopped me cold. What if there is no girl? Sure, I was 90% sure I'd delivered here before, but what if I was mistaken? What if the girl on the phone was just bait, a setup to lure me into a trap? Every pizza delivery driver alive has heard of the evil genius case. I replayed the phone call in my head. She'd been panting, said she wasn't home, begged me not to leave. The whole thing was weird, way too weird. Nope, can't risk it. Call the cops first. So I dialed 911. The operator was calm, professional, thank God, because by then I was completely falling apart. I kept rambling, tripping over my words, trying to explain 3 different points at once. You have to get there before the girl arrives. He wasn't waiting for me, he was waiting for her. But then again, maybe she doesn't even exist. But I did talk to someone on the phone, so if she is real, you need to find her because she has no idea what's happening. And listen, I only checked part of the bushes. There could be more than one of them. Oh, and you'll know the guy when you see him because, I peed all over him. Not on purpose, just... Long story. Finally, the dispatcher told me to stop talking and just stay on the line. And then, her number popped up on my phone. Incoming call. I couldn't answer without disconnecting 911, so I ignored it. Seconds later, a text came through. Hey, I'm here, but I don't see you. I blurted it out to the operator, and they said the officers were just a couple of minutes away from the address. But my stomach twisted with guilt. Rationally, I knew the odds of her being some kind of scammer were tiny. Much more likely, she was a real girl walking straight into a nightmare. I unmuted the line and said, I'm going back. I can't just sit here. They definitely didn't like that answer, but I had already turned the car around. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and the whole way I was muttering under my breath, shh, fuck, fuck, fuck. And then I saw her. I overheard my girlfriend mercilessly mocking me in front of her best friend, and it was brutal. My girlfriend's name is Jenna. She's 28, and we've been together for just over 2 years. I'm 33, a veterinarian, and we first met at my clinic. She had just moved to the city and brought her dog in for an ear infection. We started talking, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute appointment turned into an hour-long conversation. I had never been so captivated by a woman before. I used to live a typical bachelor lifestyle, thinking I'd probably stay single forever. My life, full of fleeting, casual encounters, was becoming increasingly dull and empty. Jenna is charismatic, with a large circle of friends, and her best friend is a guy named Dylan, whom she's known for years. I trust Jenna, but I'd be lying if I said their friendship didn't bother me. I'm not angry with her over it, and she assured me they've been lifelong friends with no romantic involvement. I'm confident enough in myself to accept their friendship, and even tried to get along with Dylan. He visited our city 3 times. He's a good guy, but it seemed like he didn't particularly like me. Jenna says he's just protective of her, but I think it's more jealousy than actual protection. Jenna had just finished graduate school this spring and was struggling to find work. We've been living together for a year, and I understand she couldn't yet contribute to rent or other expenses. I'm financially stable, so that wasn't an issue, but I didn't want my support to become an excuse for her to avoid seeking employment. I believe everyone needs financial independence, so I made it clear she should start paying half of the expenses once she got a job. On Monday, she messaged me that she had landed a job she really wanted after a tough interview. I was so proud of her that I decided to leave work early without telling her. I bought her favorite alcohol, picked up her favorite Chinese food, and a few weeks ago, I had bought her a necklace she loved in a shop. It had a small shark pendant, and she's obsessed with anything shark-related. I hid it in the basement, planning to surprise her later when she had forgotten about it. When I got home, I went through the side entrance to the basement to grab the necklace. As I climbed the stairs and opened the door, I overheard Jenna on the phone. Normally I wouldn't eavesdrop, but she was laughing until she cried. It sounded so sweet that I decided to wait until she finished the call to surprise her. She was talking to Dylan, which wasn't unusual. They spoke at least once a week. But then I caught what she was laughing about. It took me a few moments to realize she was mocking our intimate life. She said something like, "No, he doesn't even come close to my ex. My ex was at least 8 centimeters bigger. Every time I eat a tiny carrot, I feel sorry for him. It must be traumatizing to be bitten by the same size. It would almost be cute if it weren't so terrible. He has a great body until he takes off his boxers." There was a lot of laughter. Look, I don't care what strangers online think about my size, but what she was laughing at wasn't even true, which made it even more painful. I don't know about her ex, maybe he was huge, but I'm average, plain and simple. Not exceptional, but not a joke either. I've never felt insecure about it. Hearing my girlfriend discuss me with her friend, given my existing doubts about their relationship, was beyond hurtful. She also mocked me for being handsome, but not particularly smart. I'm actually well educated, so that didn't bother me. I know I'm intelligent, good-looking, and smart, with average equipment. After hearing this, I just left. Did I throw the flowers out of my car window? Yes. Did I cry in the parking lot? Yes. I think she either heard the basement door close or saw me drive off, because she quickly started texting me, asking when I'd be back. This happened on Monday, and I haven't brought it up with her since. I'm still processing it. It's painfully awkward, but damn it, I love her. I know I need to talk to her about it, but I don't know how. Any advice on how to start that conversation? I'm deeply hurt and not sure I can forgive her. I also want to add that I'm definitely planning to break up with Jenna. Today, I met 3 friends for a beer and told them what happened. Their advice matched yours. Break up and do it fast. I called my mom and told her everything too. Yes, I told her everything, even though it was embarrassing. We've always been very close, and I wanted to explain everything to her. I had never seen her so angry before. She knew that I had bought a ring for Jenna. I'll post an update once everything is settled, probably tomorrow. Emotionally, I'll be pretty shaken. Once again, thank you to everyone for the comments and support messages. I never expected so many people to take my side. Update. I finally gathered the courage and ended things with Jenna Thursday evening. Honestly, those were some of the most intense few days of my life. From Jenna's perspective, things got pretty messy. Apologies for the long post, but a lot happened. Following advice from friends, my mom, my brother, and many of you, I decided to talk to her in a public place. My reasoning was simple. Someone capable of such cruelty and dishonesty could easily twist the story, claiming I was abusive or any other nonsense. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do that, but after everything, better safe than sorry. I initially considered just packing her things and breaking up without explanation, but after 2 years together, I felt it was better to talk things through calmly and listen to her side, if she had one, even if it wouldn't change my decision to end things. I took her to a wine bar downtown that has small private booths with curtains. Since Monday, Jenna had been acting like an angel, which could mean 3 things. She felt guilty for her cruel behavior, she thought I might overhear her, or she simply noticed my distance and didn't understand why. She dressed up nicely, and I have to admit, she looked incredible despite everything. Jenna was also very affectionate and kept dropping suggestive comments about what she wanted to do with me later, usually my cute little baby carrot. Normally I'd laugh and enjoy it, but given the circumstances, it was hard to hear and stay composed. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say many times, so once we sat down and our wine arrived, I started talking. I don't remember every word because adrenaline was off the charts. I began by telling her how deeply I loved her, how she was the only woman with whom I felt such a profound connection, someone I fully opened up to and trusted. I told her she was the only one I had considered marrying, and the reason I went shopping for a ring. I didn't mention that I had already bought it, or that I had imagined us having children in the coming years. She kept interrupting with phrases like, "Oh, how sweet," or telling me how much she loved me. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her bluntly, if she loved me so much, why did she mock me so terribly in front of Dylan? Her expression gave me a certain satisfaction. As expected, Jenna initially denied everything and pretended not to understand what I meant. She claimed Dylan knew how much she loved me and she never made fun of me in their conversations. I simply looked at her and said something like, "Come on, Jenna." Even after I explained that I came home early Monday and overheard everything, she continued to deny it. Her calmness was irritating. I told her we both knew she was lying, and what she said was inexcusable. I couldn't understand why she would say such things, especially since she lied just to laugh at me. She kept pretending I was imagining it. She insisted she loved me so much, was never dissatisfied with our intimate life, and would never complain about my size. She claimed she loved me for my intelligence and caring nature. Had I not heard it myself, I might have believed her. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. Some commenters asked if I was sure she was talking about me when discussing her ex and his Kraken. She did mention my name, comparing me to him. I am completely sure she was referring to me and lying straight to my face. I told her I would drive her home so she could gather essential items from the house. My brother and his wife were there too. I wanted witnesses to confirm I let her collect her things without being aggressive. I said I'd pack the rest and leave it outside for her to take at her convenience. Jenna was shocked that I was actually ending things. She begged me to reconsider, but my decision was final. It was hard to hold back tears as she expressed how much she wanted to be with me forever and that she had planned to be the mother of my children. She kept asking what she should do now and where she would sleep. I told her that was no longer my problem and that she had plenty of friends she could stay with until she found a place of her own.
She only needed to take her clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Almost all furniture and decor in the house, which she had redone, had been paid for by me. And then the tears began. Jenna started crying, saying she couldn't understand how I could treat her this way. She repeated over and over that she always thought I was a good guy. I told her I am a good guy. That's exactly why I didn't throw her things on the lawn, change the locks, or leave without explanation. And then somehow she managed to twist the knife even deeper. She admitted she didn't know why she had said all those things to Dylan. Maybe it was because with him, she could laugh at things that would otherwise make her cry. Apparently, this included my penis. Normally, I don't stoop to sarcastic remarks, but I told her she was welcome to move back to her hometown and live happily with her ex and his 23-centimeter endowment. Seeing her tears vanish instantly was shocking. Clearly, in her eyes, I was a jerk, terrible with women, a failure, destined to be alone, with a tiny carrot down there. She said she never really loved me, that she saw me more as a friend and stayed to avoid hurting me. Makes sense, I guess. Then she said that if I ever proposed again, she would call me a loser and a jerk. And just in case I didn't understand, she repeated her little carrot comparison. Oh, and apparently I'm doomed to die alone. I told her that dying alone is better than dying in a marriage with a woman who doesn't love or respect me. No joke. Then she just screamed. A long, unbelievably loud scream. Not even words, just pure noise. It was terrifying. After that, she ran out, calling me a disgusting pig. I had already paid the bill and apologized to the waiter for the drama. When I stepped outside, she was just standing there, crying. Even though what she did and said was awful, it still hurt to see her like that. I didn't want to just leave her outside in the cold, so I offered to drive her home so she could gather her things, but she had to stay somewhere else afterward. She agreed. The car ride was silent, incredibly awkward. When we arrived home, my brother and his wife were there. His wife stayed inside while Jenna collected her belongings, and my brother waited with me outside. The process went relatively smoothly. I left her a note explaining that her things were on the porch and she could collect them anytime I was at work. I didn't hear from Jenna all day until it was time to come home from work. She sent a vicious message wishing me every misfortune imaginable. I didn't respond. When I got home, I found my house in complete chaos. I have no idea if she made a copy of the key or somehow knew how to pick locks, but she got inside and destroyed everything. Breakable items were smashed, furniture ripped apart, and the kitchen was ruined. The only good thing she did was lock my 2 dogs in a room, probably to keep them safe from broken glass or spilled food. I have 2 cars, one for daily use and an SUV for work, which I use for house calls or transporting large or exotic animals. Among all this chaos, I remembered that I had given her the keys to the SUV in case of emergencies.
she destroyed that too. Inside, flour was scattered and tomato sauce was spilled everywhere. It's just stuff, I know. But the most shocking part was that she could act so childish and destructive after everything we'd shared. Just the weekend before, we'd gone to a show, hung out with friends, played Monopoly, made up our own drinking game, watched Netflix, and even had sex multiple times. And now, my home and car were ruined, and I was left in turmoil. In a fit of anger, I immediately ordered 22-kilogram bags of mini carrots delivered to Jenna at her friend's address. 40 kilograms of tiny carrots, within an hour. That evening, I got plenty of angry and insulting messages from her. Yes, it was petty, but I don't regret it. Aside from the wasted food. Hopefully she donates or cooks with them. I blocked Jenna. She's truly cruel, and I know I deserve better. Since Monday, I've reflected a lot on myself as a partner and tried to understand what might have caused her to build up resentment or dissatisfaction toward me. To be completely honest, I work hard, I make time for everyone I love, and I try not to bring stress home. Some days at work are just brutal, and today was one of them. I'll admit it. Jen and I had argued about this before, and I genuinely tried to organize my schedule so I could come home at a reasonable hour and leave the stress of work behind. But anyone who's a vet or knows someone in the field understands that we're always on call for emergencies. Sometimes we have patients that need constant monitoring or overnight care. Taking a day off is possible, but it's complicated. I have an incredible team that can handle most situations, yet even on days off or during vacations, I still get calls or messages. I'm sure there were moments when Jenna felt second to my work, and honestly, I know there were. She told me that herself. I tried to adjust, but there is only so much one can do. As far as I remember, I was never intentionally mean or rude to Jenna. Sure, there were bad days when I was irritated or distant, and we had arguments and disagreements, but nothing toxic or abusive. I really believed we had a strong relationship and that we were both happy. I was happy. Still, it's hard not to question yourself and wonder if I really had disappointed her or neglected her to the point that she felt so unloved that she acted out the way she did. I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of any perceived shortcomings on my part, her words and actions were completely unacceptable. I did not deserve any of it, and that's on her. A quick update, I filed a police report and took photos of the wrecked house, hoping it will help cover at least some of the damages under insurance. Honestly, I don't expect much from the police since I can't prove it was Jenna, and frankly, I don't want to see her again. I just hope the insurance covers the damages and I'll move forward with my life.
My professor hired me as a nude maid. I'm a woman in my early 20s, and my professor is in his 30s. I work for a cleaning service that offers different options, regular cleaning or cleaning while wearing lingerie or completely nude. There's no touching, no sexual contact, and any client who crosses the line is immediately banned. Clients can choose general traits, like hair color, body type, or gender, but they can't pick a specific maid. The agency assigns someone based on availability, and both the maid and client can use fake names. No photos are ever shared, and the system automatically checks for potential conflicts, like if two people work or study at the same place, to avoid exactly the kind of situation that ended up happening to me. A few months ago, I got a message from my company about a nearby client who had requested a maid in lingerie. Apparently, I matched the description. I arrived dressed casually, jeans and a t-shirt, with the lingerie underneath, as required. When the door opened, it was my professor. We both froze. I immediately realized what had happened. I told him that the agency usually screens for overlaps like this, but obviously something had gone wrong. I offered two options. I could stay and do my job professionally, or call the office and send a replacement. Either way, we could just forget this ever happened. He chose the second option. I called my supervisor, explained the situation, and left. The company later told me that due to a software glitch or human error, no one noticed that we were both affiliated with the same university. A few days later, I ran into him on campus. He looked tense and awkward,
wouldn't make eye contact, and seemed to avoid me entirely. Later that same day, we bumped into each other again, and it was even more uncomfortable. We had classes together at the end of the previous academic year, after the cleaning incident, and back then he also acted distant, but I thought it was just because classes were online. Normally, I wouldn't care, but next year I'll have him again for several courses and mandatory one-on-one project meetings. These sessions can't be reassigned to another professor, and they directly affect my final grades. I'm confident I can stay professional, but I'm not sure he can. It's been months, and he still can't even look at me. I'm paying a lot for my education, and if this keeps up, it might impact my grades and opportunities. I have no idea what to do. I can't afford to let my academic record suffer, but confronting him might make things even worse. Update. He reported me. Following some advice I got online, I scheduled a meeting during his office hours to clear the air. I also sent a polite email saying that with the new academic year starting, my final one, I wanted to discuss my thesis topic to make sure he approved it before I began. That's something every student does. But apparently, that simple message was enough to send him into panic mode. The cleaning agency I work for also offers fully clothed maids, so he went to the university administration and claimed that he had hired that service, a standard cleaning, and that when I showed up, I offered to clean nude in exchange for help with my thesis. He said he refused. Obviously, that's a total lie. I provided the university with a recording of my phone call with the agency, which was enough to clear me. Unfortunately, there's no way to access his payment records since the service uses an anonymous billing system, and anything beyond that would require a court case, something I can't afford. Even though I was cleared, the administration said they couldn't place me in any of his classes moving forward because, formally, I was now listed as being involved in a sexual harassment investigation. He must have reported me right after receiving my email because the notice from the Student Affairs Office came less than a week later. I honestly can't understand what was going through his head. Maybe he thought I was planning to report him first and wanted to get ahead of it. But that's absurd. All I did was book an appointment like any other student. Either way, I'm leaving the university. I only had 1 year left before graduation, and I've already applied to transfer to nearby schools. But since this all happened right at the start of the semester, it's 10 times harder to arrange than if it had happened over the summer. The only good thing is, I wasn't expelled or suspended, so I don't have to explain anything to anyone. The university seems willing to quietly let this whole mess fade away. Another professor even agreed to write me a recommendation letter. The cleaning company blacklisted him and plans to share his information with other agencies, so hopefully he won't be able to pull something like this again. I also spoke with a lawyer during a free consultation. I decided not to sue. Best case scenario, if I somehow won, my name would be cleared, but my personal life would become public. My classmates and professors would find out everything, and I'd still be stuck in a university that already showed it would throw me under the bus to protect a coward. Even if I won, my professional reputation would be tarnished in academic circles. So I'm walking away with my dignity, my truth, and the hope that this man never gets the chance to hurt another student again.
My ex-wife is trying to win me back by using our daughters. Doesn't sound too serious at first, right? Yeah, it's what I thought too. But as much as I'd love to tell my ex to go to hell and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and joint custody. So completely cutting her out of my life just isn't possible, not unless I walk away from my kids too, which I'd never do. We got married young, 20 years old, dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born during the first year of marriage. After the second birth, my ex had complications that made it difficult for her to get pregnant again. I didn't care. I was just grateful she made it through safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls to love. The marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she cheated. I have 0 tolerance for betrayal. I refuse to make myself miserable for something I didn't cause. Maybe it sounds strange, but my love for her died the exact moment I learned about her affair in detail.
So no, this isn't some story about a man who can't let go. I moved on 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her. I just don't care. Whatever happens in her life means nothing to me, unless it directly affects our kids. The problem is, I seem to be the only one who's actually moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to push us back together, even though I've made it crystal clear that I have absolutely no desire to ever be with her again. Maybe the fact that I stayed single for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I just wasn't ready to jump into anything new. My daughters were my top priority. Plus, I had my own emotional mess to sort through after her betrayal, which, thankfully, I managed with help from friends, family, and therapy. My relationship with my daughters is great. We don't fight, we don't yell, and they're not rebellious or dramatic. Everything's been peaceful, except for one issue. They know their mother cheated. She told them herself about 3 years ago. Since then, I think she's been feeding them her version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the girls. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about it. Since the divorce, she hasn't dated anyone, or even tried. I guess she thinks that makes her look noble. But honestly, I find it insulting. She could cheat on me while we were married, but now she's suddenly living like a saint? Whatever. That's her problem, not mine. For years, I could ignore the little comments my daughters made about their mom. How good she looks now, how happy she seems, the photos she just happened to show them where she's clearly dressed up to impress. But lately, things have gotten worse. Why? Because I started seeing someone. Clemence isn't the first woman I've dated since the divorce, but this is by far the most serious relationship I've had since it ended. She's 8 years older than me. We actually knew each other for about 4 years before anything romantic happened. We shared a hobby, became close friends, and eventually realized there was more between us. And yes, I genuinely love her. It even surprised me when I realized it. I honestly thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again the way I once did. At first, my daughters didn't know much about Clemence. Just like my previous relationships, I kept things private. But eventually, they started coming home earlier than expected and began seeing her around. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, but soon came the sighs, the cold looks, and the questions. What is she doing here? Don't you think it's unfair to Mom? It was like they thought I was dating just to spite their mother. I sat them down for a serious talk, explained everything over and over, but it just didn't sink in. They're still clinging to some childish fantasy where their parents get back together. Clemence, thankfully, is incredibly understanding. She doesn't take it personally and keeps saying, give them time. But honestly, I'm not convinced time will fix this. It hasn't yet, so why would it now? I've run out of ideas. That's why I'm asking for advice. Is there any way, any possible approach to help my daughters finally understand that I will never get back with their mother?
Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, not really. As much as I'd love to tell my ex to get lost and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and have joint custody. So, cutting her out of my life completely isn't an option, unless I'm willing to lose my kids too. We got married young, both 20, after dating for 3 years. Our twin girls were born during the first year of marriage. My ex had some complications after that, which made future pregnancies difficult. At the time, I didn't care about that at all. I was just grateful she survived everything safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls we adored. Our marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she had cheated. I have zero tolerance for that kind of betrayal, and saw no reason to keep suffering for something that wasn't my fault. Some might find it strange, but every ounce of love I had for her died the moment I learned the full story of her affair. So no, this isn't some sad tale about a man who can't move on. I did, 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her anymore. I just couldn't care less what happens in her life as long as it doesn't affect our daughters. The real problem is that I'm the only one who truly moved on. My ex,
her family, and even our daughters keep trying to reunite us, despite me being very clear that I have zero interest in ever being with her again. Maybe the fact that I didn't date anyone for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I wasn't about to jump into another relationship that fast, especially when I had 2 girls to raise. They were my priority. Eventually, with the help of friends, family, and therapy, I got my mental health back on track. My relationship with my daughters has always been great. No fights, no yelling, no teenage rebellion, yet they're smart, kind, and we've always been close. But there's one big problem. They know their mother cheated on me because she told them about 3 years ago. Since then, I'm pretty sure she's been feeding them a twisted version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop dragging them into our adult mess, but she doesn't listen. She hasn't dated anyone since the divorce, hasn't even slept with anyone apparently. She thinks that makes her look noble. Personally, I find it insulting. When we were married, she was sleeping with someone else, and now she suddenly can live without intimacy for 7 years? Whatever, that's her problem. For years, I brushed off the occasional mentions of her looks or the photos my daughters showed me where she clearly dressed up just to make an impression. But things changed after I started dating again. My girlfriend Clemence isn't my first relationship since the divorce, but she's definitely the most serious one. She's 8 years younger than me, and we'd known each other for 4 years before we started dating. It grew naturally, from friendship into something deeper. And honestly, I love her. I didn't expect that. I thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again. Turns out I was wrong. At first, my daughters didn't know much about my relationship with Clemence. Then they started showing up at my house earlier than scheduled, sometimes finding her there. We were never inappropriate, just living our normal lives. But soon came the questions, what is she doing here? Or, that's not fair to Mom. It's like they genuinely believe I'm seeing someone just to hurt their mother. I've had long, honest talks with them, but they just don't seem to get it. They can't let go of the fantasy that their parents might reunite someday. Thankfully, Clemence is understanding. She says the girls just need time. Oh, I'm not sure that will help. It hasn't so far. So yeah, I came online looking for advice. Maybe someone out there knows how to help my daughters finally understand that no matter what happens, I'm never going back to their mother. When I try explaining that you can't be faithful to someone you're no longer with, they just ignore it. I've begged my ex countless times to stop manipulating the girls and keep them out of our adult issues, but she doesn't care. At one point, I even considered going to court to get full custody, but was advised it probably backfired. The truth is, my daughters know why we divorced. They know their mother cheated. I usually don't recommend telling kids something like that, but mine are old enough now. The problem is that their understanding of the story is based entirely on her version, filled with excuses and self-pity. A year ago, I finally tried explaining my side, only to find out she had already told them years before, when they were around 13. They know what she did, but they can't comprehend it emotionally. To them, their mother has always been loving and caring. They can't imagine her cold and distant like she was during the affair. Back then, she completely shut me out, not just physically, but emotionally. She stopped doing little things, morning kisses before work, random hugs, shared jokes, all gone. I realized something was off and eventually, with a close friend's help, uncovered the truth. She had been giving all that affection to someone else. I'll never forgive that. My daughters don't understand why, and honestly, I don't want them to. No child should ever have to carry that kind of pain. So when they talk about regret, forgiveness, or getting back together, I just can't relate. Where was all that love when it mattered? Update. It's been a while since my original post. A lot has changed. My daughters actually found that post by accident. I had no idea they were even on that site. One day, I came home from work and found them both in tears. They ran to me, hugged me, and begged me to forgive them. Apparently, they'd read one of my comments and learned the full extent of their mother's affair and how deeply it hurt me back then. We went through a lot of therapy together. Honestly, I never blamed them. They were just kids, manipulated by their mother, who used their love as a weapon. After a few months of family therapy, the psychologist told us we no longer needed weekly sessions, just occasional check-ins. My daughters and I became closer than ever. Their relationship with their mom, though, took a hit, understandably. I told them not to dwell on her mistakes. I've long since made peace with what she did. That's also something we worked through in therapy. I eventually had a serious talk with my ex, made it absolutely clear that the getting back together nonsense needed to stop. Whether she listened or not, I don't know, but at least she stopped bothering the girls with it. Or maybe they've learned to tune her out. Either way, as long as my daughters are okay, I don't care what she's doing. As things settled, Clements and my daughter started bonding, really bonding. They started talking to her more, even asking her for advice on girl stuff. The first time I saw that, I nearly cried. Not long after, Clements and the girls surprised me. They organized a private dinner, just the three of us. Then Clements proposed to me. Yeah, she beat me to it. I was stunned, but happier than I had been in years. Not just because of her proposal, but because my daughters helped her plan it. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, and now we're expecting a baby. My daughters can't wait to become big sisters, and I honestly can't wait to watch them spoil their new sibling rotten.
The client who demanded my personal number and blamed me for losing his job. I work as an insurance adjuster handling auto claims. One of my recent clients decided that his bad luck was entirely my fault. He filed a claim late in the evening after our office had closed, and I called him first thing the next morning. I had only the information he provided, nothing more. I warned him right away that his car might be considered a total loss, depending on the damage. He immediately exploded, shouting that he didn't want his car written off and that I was not allowed to move it anywhere for inspection. As I started to calmly explain alternative options, he began yelling, insulting me, and demanding that I just issue the payment. If only it were that simple, my job would be a lot easier. I explained that, under his insurance policy, we are required to inspect the vehicle before processing any payout to determine whether it's repairable or totaled. He kept arguing, so I told him I'd end the conversation and try again once he'd calmed down. I hung up and went to a meeting. Meanwhile, he started spamming our customer service line, calling over and over again, harassing at least 4 different agents, refusing to hang up until I personally answered. I told them I was in a meeting and wouldn't be available for about half an hour. He stayed on the line for several minutes, hung up, then called again. When I finally got the chance to return his call, I suggested we contact his auto repair shop and ask them to send us photos so we could make a preliminary assessment. He snapped that he'd already sent them last night. I explained there were no attachments in his email and that we needed specific photos to properly evaluate the damage. Then he said it was my job to call the shop and request the pictures, which, ironically, was exactly what I had just proposed. After that, he demanded my personal phone number. I told him I don't have a company cell phone. He insisted he needed to reach me over the weekend. I refused. He repeated the demand several times, then demanded to speak with my supervisor. I told him she was aware of the situation and would contact him when available, but that I couldn't share her private number. He ordered me to make her call right now. I reminded him she's my supervisor. I don't control her schedule. When he tried to keep me on the line until his demands were met, I told him there was nothing left to discuss and ended the call. Later, I phoned the repair shop and the employee there was rude as well, claiming I was interfering with a good man's job and wasting their time. I politely asked them to just send me the photos by email so we could move forward, and they promised to do it. My last name is rare and included in my email address, so I spelled it out several times. But 2 hours before the end of the workday, no photos had arrived. I emailed the client to let him know, and he said he'd call the shop himself. 5 minutes before closing, I tried the shop again,
No answer, no voicemail option. I sent the client another message saying, "Photos still haven't been received, so your claim will resume processing on Monday." He responded by accusing me of working in a different time zone, saying it was unfair because I had 3 extra hours. I corrected him, it's just 1 hour, and pointed out the shop had the entire day to send the images. Then he announced that, since he didn't have rental coverage, he'd lose his job on Monday, and that would be my fault. Right, so his employer is so heartless they'd fire him over missing 1 single day. Maybe he should be talking to a state's labor department instead of me. He then circled back to demanding I just approve the claim, insisting I was deliberately delaying the process to make his life miserable. I wonder what he thinks happens to adjusters who ignore procedure and pay out claims illegally. Spoiler, we don't get cookies. We can actually be fired, fined by the state, or even prosecuted. The company could also sue us for wrongful payout. And if a client knowingly cashes a check for a claim that wasn't valid, they can be charged with insurance fraud. We'll see what happens Monday. My supervisor has been reviewing my notes and listening to call recordings, and I suspect she's preparing for a very fun conversation with him, especially since every abusive call is recorded. Update 1. Nothing major yet, surprisingly. The client's gone silent, which honestly worries me more than constant shouting. My supervisor left him a voicemail yesterday, but he hasn't called back. She told me I did the right thing by switching him to written-only communication, and I don't have to answer his calls anymore. She also said that if he starts making threats, which seems entirely possible, she'll involve corporate security and help me file a report with his local police. Every call is recorded anyway. Today, I spoke with the shop owner about how unprofessional his employee had been on Friday. He admitted that the client had been harassing her non-stop on the phone, apparently because she'd made the mistake of giving her her personal number when he demanded it. Turns out, the owner is an old friend of that client. He freely shared that info, then added they're no longer friends after this repair, especially since that rude employee was his niece. He even said he'd blacklist the client permanently. Finally, I got the photos, detailed and numerous. The damage was actually minor. Clearly, he'd just hit some large metal object on the road that got wedged underneath the car. The shop even sent a photo of the bent part. And yes, you all were right, he had a large aftermarket accessory installed that wasn't covered by his policy. It's a custom roof on his pickup truck, but it wasn't damaged anyway. Even if it had been, we wouldn't cover it. His policy doesn't include custom equipment. I sent everything to our special investigations unit. While they agreed the client's behavior seemed suspicious, there wasn't enough evidence to open a full fraud case. And since it was a single vehicle accident, we're obligated to cover the repair, even if he wasn't entirely honest about what happened. Some states allow denial if a client lies about the cause, but unfortunately, not this one. I emailed him to confirm we'd received the photos and were coordinating with the shop. He never replied.
Total silence. Absolute silence. Either he's truly ashamed of his behavior, which would be the right reaction, or he's like a ticking time bomb, waiting until the end of the week when I'll be swamped with work so he can explode again and tell me how I cost him his job. We'll see. This will probably be my last update, but if anything else happens, I'll post again. Huge thanks to everyone who supported me. You helped me realize I'm not crazy or overly sensitive. And to those who say, it's your job, you're trained to handle this, let me be clear. First, no, nobody trains you to deal with this level of insanity. Second, my job is to fix cars, not to tolerate verbal abuse and unhinged tirades. Let this be a reminder to everyone, be kind to people, especially to the faceless voices on the phone who are just doing their jobs. Second update. Thank you all for the kind messages and support. A few people asked how it all ended, so here's what happened. The silence didn't last long. Turns out the client really was a walking time bomb. The repair shop sent me all the information I needed to finish the preliminary repair estimate. The shop owner explained they'd probably find more damage once they started working and would contact me for updates. He apologized again for his niece's behavior during my first call and said he's no longer friends with that client. Our special investigations team reviewed the case and concluded there wasn't enough evidence to call it fraud, so that was that. I emailed the client asking where he wanted the payment sent, directly to him or to the repair shop. He immediately demanded a call, claiming he disagreed with the estimate. Here's how auto insurance payments actually work. The company first creates a preliminary estimate based on visible damage. An initial payment is issued to start the repair process. The shop and insurer stay in touch. If more hidden damage is discovered, additional payments are made later. Simple enough, right? Not for this client. He started yelling that the shop's estimate was $7,000, but we were only paying $6,500. I explained that we're happy to work with the shop and pay more if new damage is found, but the insurance can only cover verified damage. I also mentioned that we keep policy prices fair by aligning payouts with shop estimates and avoiding unnecessary overpayment. He didn't let me finish. He screamed that I'd cost him his job and now was refusing to pay what the shop demanded. I clarified that no one was refusing payment, it was just the first installment, and I only needed to confirm where to send it. Then I warned him that if he kept talking to me like that, I'd end the call. His response? Of course you will. No hint of reflection, no apology, acting like a spoiled child, though he's almost 40. I tried to continue, but he kept shouting over me, saying disgusting things about me and my family. Finally, I said, "Do you really want to finish that sentence on a recorded line that dozens of people might hear later?" He paused for a second and then said, "I hope your husband rapes you and leaves you." Yes, he really said that. I'd recently gotten married, and IT was in the middle of changing my name in our systems, so some programs showed my maiden name and others my new one, meaning I had to explain it constantly. I'd even explained it to this client earlier, so he knew he was saying that to a newlywed woman. I admit, I lost my professional tone for a moment. I told him, "Sir, throughout this entire process, the only thing preventing your car from being fixed is you. The way you've treated me, my coworkers, and the shop employees is appalling. You should be ashamed of yourself. You haven't said a single kind word to me. Working with you has been an absolute nightmare. Now you're spewing vile comments about my personal life, even after I told you last Friday that it was none of your business when you demanded my personal number. And now you're insulting my husband, someone you've never met and know nothing about. My husband is a far better man than you'll ever be, even though he's half your age. At least he knows how to treat people with respect, even in tough situations. I genuinely pity your wife if she has to live with someone like you. At least my husband doesn't have to force me to sleep with him. The fact that your mind went there immediately says everything about you. Maybe try fixing your own home before meddling in other people's lives." He cursed at me a few more times, and I ended the call, because honestly, they don't pay me enough to take that kind of abuse. He called customer support again and made another representative cry. I took over the call once more and told him he was now restricted to written communication only. I wouldn't answer his calls again, only emails or messages. Then I hung up. I thought that was the end, but apparently he still had my supervisor's contact info from Monday and called her directly. She phoned me afterward and told me what happened. He claimed I'd accused him of sexually assaulting his wife just because he asked about the estimate I supposedly prepared, even though I don't do estimates at all. That's a different department. He said he only wanted to clarify next steps when I hung up. Thankfully, my manager had already listened to all our recorded calls and didn't believe a word he said. She put him on hold, pulled up the recording, listened again, and then tore into him for the things he said to me. When he tried to justify himself by saying I was rude, she shut him down immediately. She told me I'm one of the top specialists in the department with the highest customer satisfaction ratings. She'd seen me calmly handle incredibly difficult clients, and that he was the first person ever to make me lose my composure. Then she told him that from now on, his account would officially be limited to written communication only, something I had already requested with her earlier. She warned him that if she heard about one more case of him verbally abusing an employee, she'd escalate it as a harassment case. Unfortunately, we can't fire him as a client.
He still pays us money, and upper management only cares about revenue, not what we go through. Hopefully, this pushes him to cancel his policy and become someone else's problem. I asked my supervisor if I'd face any disciplinary action for that call. She replied, "What call? I didn't hear any call, and I certainly couldn't delete a recording if it didn't exist," basically covering my back in case he tries to complain further. I sent the repair estimate to the shop with instructions on how to request additional payments if new damage is found. Then the client emailed me again asking me to send the payment directly to him. Apparently, he called the shop afterward and got into a screaming match with them too, because soon after he wrote, "Send me the money, the shop pissed me off." So I did, but made the check payable to both him and the lien holder, meaning he has to get it endorsed by the shop before cashing it. And of course, it's going by regular USPS mail, not express delivery. Finally, I closed the case. Still, I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over yet. If anything else happens, I'll let you know, but thankfully, I'll never have to speak to that man again. Once again, thank you all for the support.
A brash radio host kept yelling at his boss that he was quitting. Well, if that's what he wanted so badly. There once was a man named Brian. He was one of the two hosts of a morning radio show back when it was still popular. You probably know the type. Two friendly voices on air, a quick weather update, a summary of celebrity gossip, and a couple of songs. I worked as an advertising sales manager at the station that aired this morning show. Brian had come to us from a big city. He was new to daytime radio. Before that, he'd only handled late-night weekend DJ shifts and copied ad spots from CDs so they could be played on air. That job is basically the lowest rung at any radio station, and nowadays machines do most of it. It's important to understand, geography is everything when it comes to climbing the radio career ladder. Working in a major city, really a major media market, usually means higher pay, more listeners, and greater prestige. As I said, Brian arrived from a major city we'll call Big City, or BC. Whenever you see BC in this story, imagine Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, or San Francisco. The specific one doesn't matter. Our cluster of radio stations was based in a mid-sized city. Think somewhere like San Antonio, Cincinnati, Salt Lake City, or Jacksonville. For Brian, moving to us was a huge career leap. He jumped from a part-time nobody to a full-fledged morning show host. But to make that jump happen, he had to swallow his ego and leave the high-profile market for a mid-tier one. Brian's boss, the station's program director, was a guy named Petey. He was responsible for everything that aired except for the commercials. That was my territory. Petey also oversaw the hosts and the music. I always thought his calm, gentle personality came from the fact that he had 5 kids at home. When you're raising that many children, you got used to big personalities and emotional outbursts. In tense work situations, Petey was like an anti-catalyst. When he showed up, everything usually settled down. He was also just a great human being. He and his wife had adopted 3 of their 5 children. Over time, it became obvious that Brian neither liked nor respected Petey. It started with small, snide remarks about supposedly stupid decisions Petey made. Brian's favorite phrase was, "Back in BC, we never did it that way." He made several attempts to get Petey fired. He'd walk into my office and say things like, "Petey decided, insert decision here. Isn't that a terrible idea? In BC, this would never happen." I always told him I stood by Petey's decisions. Eventually, things escalated to Brian regularly screaming at Petey. He'd get furious over some minor issue and blow up. A few times he even stormed out, slamming doors, shouting that Petey could go to hell and that he was quitting to return to BC. But after a couple hours, he'd cool down and come back. At Petey's request, everyone pretended nothing had happened. "He just needs to let off steam," Petey would say. Despite everything, Petey stayed patient with Brian. The morning show still had decent numbers, plenty of listeners, and solid ratings. My team sold lots of ad spots at good prices, and everyone was making money.
Petey was willing to tolerate Brian acting like a raging monster as long as the performance remained strong. But here's the truth. The show wasn't actually that good. The ratings were high only because we had almost no competition in that radio format. That changed a few years later when a competing station launched their own morning show. Our numbers tanked. What used to be the leading program in our target demographic suddenly had real rivals. I'm not sure Brian even noticed, but my team and I definitely did. Demand drives pricing, and suddenly we had a product with weaker demand, meaning cheaper ad rates and fewer advertisers. Eventually, my boss noticed too. A group of managers, including Petey and me, decided that something had to change. If this had been a corporate station, Brian and his co-host would have been fired long ago. But this was a privately owned company run by people who cared about their staff. They wanted to keep both morning hosts employed, Brian included, at their current pay, just in different on-air roles across our cluster. For several weeks, management already knew the morning show would be restructured, but we hadn't yet finalized the new lineup. Only the leadership team was aware of the coming changes. Brian had no idea he was about to be reassigned. Then one morning, right after the show ended at 9 a.m., Brian walked into Petey's office to discuss the schedule for weekend appearances. We called them remotes, on-site broadcasts that helped radio hosts earn some extra cash. You probably heard these.
Hey everyone, this is Chicken Boy, coming to you live from Salmonella Chrysler Ford Jeep. That's how those remote broadcasts usually sounded. Advertisers paid hosts separately for these appearances. At the time, the standard pay was about $100 per hour. So a host could sit in a car showroom for a 2-hour broadcast, chat with salespeople, and walk out with $200 in cash. Most weekends had 5 or 6 of these gigs. Petey was the one assigning hosts to the remotes. He tried to split them as fairly as possible so everyone had a chance to earn extra money. Brian constantly tried to grab more than his share, and more often than not, he got what he wanted. One Tuesday, right after Petey posted the schedule for the upcoming weekend, Brian stormed into his office. Petey's office was just 2 doors down from mine. Brian demanded to know why he'd been given so few remotes. Petey calmly told him that he already had 2 out of the 6 for that weekend. But that wasn't enough for Brian. Moments later, he barged into my office and said something like, "Don't you think advertisers would prefer the top morning show host for their event instead of some random overnight DJ? Back in BC, that's how it worked." I replied, "Assigning talent to remotes is Petey's responsibility. He makes the right call for both the advertisers and the station." Brian scoffed, spun around, and blasted back toward Petey's office, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. From my desk, I heard him yell, "Aw, screw this! You're an idiot! I quit! I'm going back to BC!" Then he burst out, stormed through the lobby, and headed straight to the dealership loaner car, the promotional vehicle the station provided him to drive. I walked over to Petey's office. "He's just blowing off steam, right?" I asked. Petey looked unusually serious. "You heard what he said? He said he quits. I'm pretty sure half the building heard it too." Then Petey said, "Come with me to accounting." Of course, I knew exactly what was coming. Brian had resigned verbally in front of both of us, and Petey had a witness. In accounting, our bookkeeper, Dolores, said it would be best for Petey to write a formal memo documenting what happened and officially accept Brian's resignation on behalf of the company. I wasn't at the station when Brian eventually came back. I'd gone to a sales meeting. But here's what Petey and the receptionist later told me. Several hours after his meltdown, Brian strolled in as if nothing had happened. He tried entering through the employee door, but his code no longer worked. So he circled around to the main entrance and came in through the front lobby. He tried his access code again at the inner door. Still dead. The receptionist called Petey.
Petey arrived carrying paperwork. Right there in the front lobby, he said, "Brian, your resignation has been accepted. Here are the documents. Please sign." Brian froze, stunned. He signed without saying a word. Petey continued, "We'll also need the keys to the dealership vehicle you were driving." Brian slid the key off his ring and handed it over. "We'll pack up your belongings from your desk and the car. Should we send them to your current address or forward them to BC?" Brian whispered, "My current address," with tears in his eyes. The receptionist ordered a taxi for him. Brian sat outside the station crying until it arrived. He later tried to get a job at another radio station in town, but as far as I know, nothing ever worked out. I have no idea where he is now or what he's doing. His former co-host is still in radio, hosting afternoon shows on another station. We replaced Brian's show with something better, and the ratings bounced back. The dealership promotion was moved to daytime, and the midday host happily drove the sponsored car around for another 3 months.
I live in my boyfriend's house, and his behavior keeps overwhelming me and triggering my anxiety. I'm 28, my boyfriend is 27. I moved in with him about 8 months ago. I'm disabled and have significant sensory issues. That part matters. In general, he tries to respect my needs. My boyfriend is a professional sculptor, and his studio is inside the house. It's placed in such a way that I have to walk through it to reach the bathroom or go outside. There's no other practical location for it. The problem is that his behavior while he's working affects me a lot. He wears headphones, blasts music, dances, sways, mimes singing. He says it helps him stay focused, and I do believe that. The core conflict is that he moves constantly, insisting it shouldn't matter because I can't hear anything. I've tried explaining that because of my sensory issues, it still overloads me, as if I can hear the music even when I don't. He suggested I just avoid that part of the house while he works, except that's where the bathroom is. There's also the issue of him bringing buyers into the house. We agreed he has to warn me ahead of time and ask if I'm okay with it, but he regularly breaks that rule. I come home to a stranger standing in my living room because he didn't expect me back. Having unknown people in the house spikes my anxiety so badly I need days to recover afterward. His solution? Again, just don't go through the studio. Except this is also my home now. Yesterday, well, actually the whole week had been terrible for me, and I desperately needed peace in my own space. So I hid the key to his studio. I told him I'd give it back in an hour. I just needed a moment of complete calm. I even repeated his own logic back to him, saying maybe he should use another part of the house for a bit. I really was going to return the key after an hour, but he exploded. He said I was going to ruin one of his commissions by keeping him from working immediately. That triggered a severe anxiety episode for me. Here's where I probably messed up. I didn't return the key until evening. He thinks I acted like a jerk. I feel like I just needed a moment of quiet in my own home. What do you think? Update. I admit it now. Hiding his studio key was a terrible thing to do. It was a spiteful move, and I regret it. My boyfriend and I talked through several possible solutions, and none of them involve locking him out of his workspace. A few things people asked in comments. I asked my boyfriend directly if he thinks I'm abusive. He said no. To disabled people who said working through pain made them less patient with others, I'm genuinely sorry that your experience was so harsh. To non-disabled people who lectured me about work and government support, do you have any idea how impossible it is to get disability benefits here? They offered me no resources, no real help, and not even financial support to pay for the medical evaluations their system requires. Their solution was to offer training for jobs nobody would willingly do. For everyone asking about the house layout, I didn't design it. The bathroom is where it is. The studio is where it fits. Nothing I can do. For those saying my sensitivity isn't a disability, it is. Sensory disorders mean I pick up on subtle movements, vibrations, and tiny shifts that others don't even notice. One commenter said it doesn't sound like a major issue because he only dances in the room when I occasionally pass through. But that's not how it works. Even when I'm not in the room, knowing he's doing it keeps me on edge. I feel it in my body. His dancing and constant motion affect me the same way loud music or a crowded event would for anyone else. It drains me, it overstimulates me, and I can't relax until it stops. Living with my parents isn't an option. They dumped me on my sister, and she eventually dumped me somewhere else. I don't have a safety net. A lot of people here judged me, but disability truly means being limited. The less support and stability you have, the more your condition deteriorates and the less independent you can be. Someone suggested that he should only work on days when I can tolerate his movement. Reminder, he financially supports both of us. He works whenever inspiration hits, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 8 or more at any time of day. I understand how creative work functions, but if I can compromise, he should be able to compromise a bit too. Maybe choose calmer working days when I'm overwhelmed, or shift his schedule slightly if it means I can stay functional. Another commenter said he has a right to bring clients home because the studio is there. True, but when I leave the house, I need a lot of time afterward to feel safe when I return. Coming back to strangers in my home destabilizes me. That's the situation. It's messy, complicated, and neither of us is perfect, but we're trying to figure it out.
When I suddenly come home and find someone else's presence lingering in my space, I can't unwind at all. It completely throws off my sense of safety, and that affects my health more than people think. After moments like that, I avoid leaving the house even more. Sometimes I can still feel a stranger's presence for weeks after they've already left. I get that people without sensory issues believe that's impossible, but think of how someone who survived a break-in feels afterward, like their personal space was invaded and the place they should feel safe suddenly isn't. That's exactly what happens to me. Right now, I'm basically financially trapped. If I could afford to live elsewhere, I probably would have already moved out, but I literally can't work because of my condition. That's why I moved in with him in the first place. It feels like being stuck no matter how much I want to fix things. I know I should be more patient, but we discussed my needs over and over even before I moved in, and it feels like all those conversations were erased. He's respectful in many everyday ways, but in these bigger issues, it's like he stops hearing me. He keeps saying I'm not stopping him from working, but that's not the point. I simply cannot live alone and have nowhere else to go. Update number 1. I'm 27. My boyfriend is 28. I moved in with him last year after my sister, who I'd been living with, suddenly demanded that I leave. I have a disability, a severe sensory disorder, and I'm unable to work, so moving in with him was the only real option. I also struggle with being alone for extended periods because of my condition. The whole conflict revolves around his sculpture studio. To reach the bathroom or even step outside, I have to walk through the space where he works. He dances constantly while he's sculpting, and he brings clients and buyers into the house. All of that makes me feel unsafe. For most people, it probably sounds like nothing, but his movements drain me physically. Even when I'm not in the room, I feel him dancing, and it overwhelms me to the point of anxiety. Strangers inside the house can trigger a full panic attack and leave me shaken for days. We've talked so many times about what I need to feel safe, but no matter how many conversations we have, nothing changes in the long run. Although in many everyday tasks he's considerate, when it comes to the core issues, he doesn't seem to grasp how serious they are. Recently we argued. I hid the key to his studio because I was absolutely burned out and desperate for at least 1 hour of silence in the place that's supposed to be my home too. I admit it was the wrong choice, but when I'm overwhelmed, I can't think clearly or make rational decisions. I just wanted my boundaries respected. Some people asked what I contribute to the relationship. I contribute emotionally and take care of daily tasks.
I don't judge a person's value by their income, and I believed my boyfriend thought the same. I clean, take care of the dog, help with chores, support him emotionally, and have been by his side for a long time. Strangely, I can tolerate crowded places more easily than these situations at home, because when I step outside, I mentally prepare myself for noise and stimuli. At home, I expect peace. On good days, I visit the beach nearby or take small trips to stores. I asked him to work on a schedule so I could predict when he would be in the studio. Structure helps me manage my energy, and sometimes I need him to adjust on difficult days. I would prefer buyers not to come inside the house at all, but if it's unavoidable, they could meet him in the backyard patio next to the studio, something we had agreed on from the beginning. But he still kept bringing buyers inside whenever he thought I wasn't home, and multiple times I came back earlier and ran into them anyway. We also discussed establishing a clear routine so I could prepare myself mentally. I even asked politely, never demanding, if he could simply avoid dancing when I'm home. People in offices or stores don't dance while working because it distracts others, so I honestly don't think my request is unreasonable, especially considering how badly it affects my health. Update number 2. From the boyfriend. Unique translation. I'm almost 30. My girlfriend is 2. She moved in with me last year. She has a severe sensory disorder, and her move coincided with major financial problems. I could support her, and I truly believed I could adjust to her needs. I've depended on others before, and I had friends who supported me during hard times. I wanted to be that person for her. But over time, the tension between us kept building. Everyday things bothered her because of her sensory issues. I tried adjusting everything: new furniture, reduced noise and smells, restricting my work to one area, avoiding guests, taking hobbies aside. Each time I fixed something, a new issue appeared. Eventually, it felt like even my existence in certain parts of the house irritated her. I started feeling unwelcome in my own home, even though she still relied on my emotional and financial support. My work began to suffer, and resentment started growing in ways I didn't like. I gently encouraged her to seek professional help, but she took it as criticism. We drifted further apart. She became more verbally hostile and withdrawn. I have my own mental health struggles, so all this hit me extremely hard. I battled guilt and depression for months. The breaking point was when I started missing deadlines. It became easier not to come home than to try working in that environment. I've spent years building my career, something that gives me real purpose, and I watched it start to crumble. One day, I came home, walked into her room, and told her I couldn't keep living like this. She broke down, saying she couldn't survive alone. I opened my mouth and said words I regret even now. "Well, then I guess you're screwed." I added that if she can't live alone, can't live with others, and refuses help, then she's doomed. As soon as the words left my mouth, I saw her face: fear, hurt, betrayal. That expression will stay with me forever. I'm staying at a hotel now while figuring out the logistics of separating. She won't speak to me, only texted that what I said traumatized her. I need to know if I crossed a moral line. The relationship is over. I only want to know whether I was wrong in that moment. Someone mentioned a post from months ago that sounded identical to our situation. When I saw it, I realized it was us. Seeing everything written out so plainly hit me harder than I expected. There have been no further updates since then.
My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to hand it over to my golden child sister. She ended up crashing on the way to the airport, so I took my ticket back and went anyway. Hi, I'm 18, and for my birthday, my grandparents on my dad's side gifted me a plane ticket to Rome plus a check for travel expenses. I was beyond excited, but the very next day, my parents started pressuring me to be selfless and give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21 and the golden child of the family, if that wasn't already obvious. Their excuse? June is studying architecture, and seeing Rome in person would be an amazing opportunity for her resume and her language skills. I pointed out that I'm going into literature, and Rome would be just as valuable for me, but they didn't care. The kicker? June had already been given the same choice at 18. Grandparents offered her a trip abroad, but she turned it down and asked for cash instead. My turn finally came, and suddenly I'm not allowed to enjoy it. For weeks, the arguments dragged on. My parents guilt-tripped me, listing every sacrifice they've made for me, calling it a small favor to give up this trip. I resisted at first, until one day they slipped up and said they didn't want the trip wasted on me. That broke me. Basically, if I went, it was worthless, but if June went, it mattered. They tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Eventually, I gave in and said, fine, whatever. I figured there was no way the airline would even allow them to change the ticket, so I still had my check at least. But somehow, they pulled strings. On the day of the flight, June showed up with my boarding pass and headed to the airport instead. And then, karma hit. On the way, we got a call. June had been in a car accident. Apparently, she grabbed the steering wheel of the taxi because she thought the driver was taking the wrong route. The car spun out and hit a tree. June walked away with scratches, but the poor driver took the full impact. Broken arm, deep head gash, hospitalized. He's suing her now, and my parents are panicking, trying to cover the damages with their savings. When they told me what happened, I snapped. The words just slipped out. That's karma for forcing me to give up Rome. They were horrified, told me I was heartless, that words carry weight, and now they finally saw my true selfish nature. Hypocrisy much? They literally told me my trip would be wasted if I went, but apparently that wasn't cruel. Furious, I grabbed a small bag, ordered a taxi, and headed to the hospital myself. I realized in that moment, no matter what I did, my family would never see me as worthy or equal, so why keep sacrificing for them? When I arrived, June was busy spinning her version of the accident to the cops, trying to claim it wasn't her fault. I didn't even bother arguing. I just walked up and asked her one thing. Do you still have my boarding pass? Update. My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome. My parents forced me to give it to my golden child's sister. She crashed on the way to the airport, and I ended up taking the ticket back and flying anyway. So, yeah, here's what happened next. When I confronted June at the hospital, she looked completely stunned and confused. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I grabbed her bag, dug through it, and found my boarding pass. Without another word, I bolted out, jumped into the taxi, and rushed straight to the airport. I barely made it in time, but somehow, against all odds, I ended up on the plane. And then it hit me. I was actually flying to Rome. I didn't check my phone until I landed. And wow, my family is furious. My parents think I'm a heartless monster because, in their words, I abandoned my sister after the accident. The accident she caused herself, might I add. June is pissed because she claims I stole her chance, when in reality, she stole mine first. All I did was take back what was mine to begin with. Apparently, the family consensus is that I was wrong and owe everyone an apology. June even texted me that her parents are draining their savings to pay off the taxi driver who's suing her for damages, and that I should be helpful by handing over the birthday check my grandparents gave me. According to her, I'm selfish for traveling while the family is suffering. But honestly, I don't think I owe anyone anything. To answer some of the questions people had, the boarding pass issue.
I'm 99% sure my parents never actually figured out how to legally transfer the ticket. June probably just planned to show up and bluff her way through security. If they'd really switched the booking, I wouldn't have been able to board with my passport. So their plan was just smoke and mirrors, and it backfired. Why I still live at home? It's complicated. I grew up believing that if I just tried harder, my parents would eventually treat me like they treat June. I spent 18 years trying to earn their love, never realizing how toxic that mindset was. Moving in with my grandparents never seemed like an option. They live far out of town, and honestly, I thought keeping the peace with my parents was my best shot. Spoiler, it wasn't. But now I'm realizing I don't have to live like this anymore. My relationship with June? We've never been close. I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me, we just don't get along. She's always been controlling, the kind of person who had to sit in the front seat even on family trips. So of course she tried to take the wheel from the taxi driver because she thought she knew the faster route. That's exactly the kind of thing she does. And yes, my parents aren't doing great financially. Mom's a nurse, dad's a high school football coach. They rely heavily on my grandparents' help. Now, with this lawsuit hanging over them, they're in real trouble. If they want financial help from my grandparents, they'll have to admit what actually happened, which I doubt they're eager to do.
Update number 1. I've had a couple of days to think it over, and honestly, I've decided not to waste this trip worrying about my parents or June. This is probably the last chance I'll get for years. Once I start college, I won't have this kind of freedom again. So I'm going to enjoy Rome. My sister made her choices, my parents made theirs. For once in my life, I'm choosing me. Update number 2. My Rome trip changed everything. Now I live with my grandparents. They're adults and they can deal with their own mess. It's not my fault they tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with and ended up facing the consequences. You guys were right. It was foolish of me to ever expect them to appreciate my sacrifice. They'll always resent me no matter what I do. So why should I keep giving up my happiness for them? Right now, I'm having the best time of my life in Rome. This morning, I finally opened up to my grandparents about everything. How my parents have treated me all these years, how they've always put June first, and how I was constantly overlooked. Even my closest friends never knew the full story. So telling my grandparents felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were shocked that it had gone on for so long and that I kept quiet. I told them I always thought if I just stay quiet and keep trying to be the perfect daughter, eventually my parents will love me too. But now I finally understand. That day will never come. My grandparents told me I did the right thing. They insisted that when I come back from Rome, I should go straight to their house instead of my parents'. They said they'll make all the arrangements for me to move in with them. When I reminded them that I'll be starting college in the fall, they smiled and said that's not a problem. They'll cover all my expenses themselves. That one conversation literally changed my life. For the first time, I know where I'll belong when I return. My parents are furious, of course. They never planned to pay for my college anyway. They had told me from the start that since they already paid for June's education, I was on my own. But now it doesn't matter. I'll be okay. Update number 3. My trip ended a few days ago, and I'm officially living with my grandparents. When I got back, I went straight to their house, and to my surprise, they had already prepared a guest room for me and even hired movers to bring all my things from my parents' place. They welcomed me so warmly, I almost cried. They told me what happened after our phone call. Apparently, the night of June's accident, my parents had called my grandparents asking for help. They didn't want to dip into their own savings or risk a lawsuit, especially since the dashcam footage clearly showed June was at fault. The only way out was a settlement, but the taxi driver was asking for a huge sum. When they all met, my grandparents first asked my parents about me, whether it was true they had always treated me unfairly and even forced me to give up my Rome trip.
My parents tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the time to discuss me since I was off partying in Rome. But my grandparents pressed, and eventually my parents snapped and admitted everything. They said yes, it was true, but claimed I deserved it because I abandoned the family when things got hard. They accused me of showing up at the hospital only to snatch the boarding pass, not caring about June. They even said I'd always been jealous because June was better at everything. Then they called me spoiled and selfish and told my grandparents that when I returned, they wouldn't tolerate me anymore. That was the final straw. My grandparents cut ties with them on the spot. My parents told them if they wanted to take me in, then fine, because they were done with me anyway. Hearing all this broke my heart. Deep down, I always knew my parents didn't care about me, but having them outright say it, that hurt more than I can describe. I cried so much that night. But through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They've shown me what family is supposed to feel like. For the first time in my life, I finally feel safe. This is my home now until I leave for college in a couple of months. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. Update number 4. My grandparents completely changed my life, and my parents got a reality check. When I leave for college, I won't have to worry about a thing. My grandparents are covering all my expenses. Since returning, I haven't spoken to my parents or June at all. I didn't even read their last messages because I wanted to just enjoy my trip. June's messages were all the same, calling me selfish, spoiled, worthless, and saying she's glad she doesn't have to deal with me anymore because I'm unworthy of her company. Honestly, I think she got it backwards. She's the one unworthy of mine. But I really don't care. The words that hurt most come from my parents, though even their words no longer surprise me.
They sent messages accusing me of being heartless, saying they should have stopped me at the hospital, claiming it was their fault for not raising me properly, and pointing out that even at the hospital, I escaped to go on the trip. They kept repeating things like, "We did everything to give you a comfortable life." Comfortable life doesn't equal good childhood, I thought. Sure, they fed me, clothed me, and put a roof over my head, but that doesn't erase years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional harm. They said I complained out of jealousy of June, and therefore calling them villains was unfair. Then they concluded by calling me a void, saying I wasted their time and energy, and now they're finally happy without me. It stung, and I nearly cried. But after talking with my grandparents, I promised myself I would no longer let their cruel words break me. I blocked my parents, cutting off all contact. I need to start healing and maybe erase their toxic influence from my mind. I don't know if I can do it completely, but I will try. The funniest, most insane part happened today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I returned from Rome. I had no clue what was going on with my parents or June. I assumed they were still scrambling money for the taxi settlement. But today, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, clearly ready for revenge. Thankfully, they didn't even acknowledge me. They went straight to the living room where my grandparents were. I froze, unsure what to do, but my grandparents told me to sit with them. They could see the looks on my parents' faces, annoyance, anger, but nothing was said out loud. When my grandparents asked why they had come, the parents said they still expected compensation for all the money they supposedly spent on me over the years. They pulled out documents claiming I owed them almost $120,000 for raising me. I was floored. The audacity. These were the people who had done the bare minimum, and now they were trying to profit off of it? My grandparents calmly asked to speak privately, leaving me out. After a few tense minutes, they came back and said they were willing to pay, but only if my parents returned all the money they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years. That was it. My parents were completely blindsided, and I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, they shouted, slammed the door, and left. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon, and honestly, it doesn't matter. My grandparents have proven they can handle them, and my father being their only son doesn't change anything. I leave for college in a few months, and for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely excited. Looking back, going to Rome was probably the best decision I've ever made. It not only gave me an amazing trip, but also helped me finally claim my life and freedom.
told my dad's friend exactly what I think of him. I told my father's longtime friend, a man who's treated me like a child my entire life, that I hate him. Years ago, my dad met a man named Harold through mutual friends, and they hit it off immediately. I was 18 at the time, a college student, and we were never close. Still, for some reason, Harold considered himself a family friend and always talked down to me like I was 5. Every time I saw him, I tried to convince myself he wasn't that bad, and every time he proved me wrong within a minute. He didn't respect boundaries and loved to remind me I was just a kid. Whenever I joined a conversation, he'd mock me, my studies, my hobbies, anything, just to get a reaction. And when he saw he'd annoyed me, he'd grin and say, half jokingly, "Do you hate me yet?" I'd always reply, "No, but only because of Dad." The final straw came when I was 20. We were having a barbecue, and out of nowhere, Harold interrupted everyone to say, "You know, I actually like you, even though you're such a rude, arrogant girl." I'd been quiet the whole day, doing some homework while helping out, polite and calm every time someone spoke to me. Even if I hadn't been, that comment was completely out of line. After that, I started avoiding every family gathering where he might show up. Fast forward to yesterday, my dad's girlfriend was having a small birthday dinner at Dad's apartment. I came with my fiancé and our 6-month-old son, and of course, Harold was there. I hadn't seen him in years, but he talked to me exactly the same way, like I was some clueless teenager. Except now I'm 26, engaged, and a mother. Throughout the party, he kept offering advice that I was too young to marry, too young to raise a baby. Thankfully, most of the guests disagreed with him. My son slept through most of the afternoon, and when he woke up hungry, I went to feed him in my old bedroom. There's still a crib there. When I came back, I heard Harold joking about how long I'd been gone, making disgusting comments about me barely keeping up as a mom. Then he interrupted a conversation I was having with one of Dad's friends to start interrogating me about motherhood, like it was his business, and made more comments about my age. The moment he asked if I'd ever considered putting my baby up for adoption, I realized I was done. I grabbed my son, told my fiancé we were leaving, and said goodbye to everyone, except Harold. As we were heading for the door, he followed us, asking, "Why are you leaving?" I tried to brush him off, but he kept pressing. Finally, like he always did, he laughed and said, "Come on, do you hate me or something?" And this time, I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, I do. Can we go now?" He just stood there speechless as we walked out. On the drive home, my fiancé told me he was proud of me. The next morning, my dad called and said the exact opposite, that I'd been rude, that I'd made things awkward. We argued a bit before deciding to drop it. I know this isn't over, but if it continues, it won't be because of me. It wasn't my proudest moment, and part of me regrets saying it out loud, but I'm done letting that man humiliate me. Edit. Wow, there are a lot of comments here, so I'll answer a few common ones. No, I don't think Harold is secretly in love with me. His behavior has always been patronizing and dismissive, not flirty. And for the record, no, he didn't tell me to give up my son. He asked me if I'd thought about it when I first got pregnant. Still an awful question, especially since he cut off another woman who was also pregnant just to say it. I don't like drama. When someone makes me uncomfortable, I leave. When I don't like a person, I avoid them. It's easier that way. My dad and I argued until I told him exactly what Harold said about adoption. That finally shut him up, though I don't think he fully understood that this wasn't the only reason I left. It was just the last straw. I don't expect my dad to stop being friends with Harold. He's an adult and can make his own choices. I never told him I hated Harold before because I didn't think I needed to. He's Dad's friend, not mine. I've been distancing myself from that man since I was 20. I've seen him maybe twice in 6 years. My fiancé didn't hear the comments. He was across the room, but I told him everything in the car, and he's completely on my side. Before we move to the update, I'll throw the question to you all. Do you think I was right to finally tell Harold I hated him? Personally, I think I was. He'd pushed me for years, waiting for that reaction, and I finally gave it to him. There's a big difference between teasing a teenager and insulting a grown woman who's a mother. Some people need to learn that line.
Update 1. Hey everyone. I honestly didn't plan to write an update, but I had a bit of time, so here we are. Let's start with the biggest theory, that Harold has a crush on me. I really don't think that's true. His comments have always been annoying and condescending, but never sexual. Though I'll admit, some of your replies made me a bit uneasy. Even if I regretted my words at first, I never once doubted that standing up to him was the right thing to do. I think the regret came from realizing that 8 years of keeping the peace had finally ended. It took a bit of time to feel the relief, but it came. Honestly, I wanted to tell him off ever since that barbecue years ago. That's when he went from annoying to insufferable. The day after I posted, my dad called Harold. Apparently, Harold tried to spin everything, said the adoption comment came from a place of concern, that he just worried I became a mom too young and didn't know what I was doing. He even apologized to my dad. Yeah, right. I don't buy it for a second. The next day, Dad called me and said I should forgive Harold because it was all a misunderstanding. He even suggested I apologize for overreacting and saying I hated him over something so small. Thing is, Harold made plenty of demeaning comments right in front of my dad, usually when others were around, so Dad just never noticed. He tends to ignore anything that doesn't directly affect or anger him. So no, I don't expect him to suddenly understand. For him, nothing Harold said was that bad. For me, it was years of disrespect. I told my father I hadn't exaggerated when I said I hated Harold, and that his comment about adoption wasn't the only reason. I listed nearly every humiliating thing he'd ever said or done, including what happened at the party. He didn't remember any of it. I made it very clear that I despised Harold long before that day and had nothing to apologize for. Then I told him that I wouldn't attend any event where Harold would be present. My father didn't have to stop being friends with him or inviting him over, but he needed to understand that he couldn't count on me being there. I said I'd always ask in advance who was invited, and if he lied, I'd simply leave. Dad said I was overreacting, but I reminded him that I had been avoiding Harold for 6 years, and no one even noticed, so clearly it wasn't a problem for anyone. Since that barbecue incident, I'd only seen him twice, once at lunch last week, and another time when I was pregnant. Clearly, my father's life hadn't fallen apart without me socializing with his friend. I told him I wasn't obligated to like his friends, just like he wasn't required to like mine. We argued a bit, but in the end, he agreed to my terms. Yesterday, while we were talking about something unrelated, he casually mentioned that Harold was upset. I ignored it. I'm not planning to cut contact with my father completely. I know there were moments over the past few years when I was close to doing it, but ultimately I realized it wouldn't change much. Our relationship actually became easier once I moved out. Now we only see each other a couple of times a month. It still annoys him that I rarely call or text, but at least he stopped complaining. There's no point in cutting off someone who no longer has control over your life. It's better to remember what they did wrong while raising you and make sure not to repeat their mistakes with your own child. Though honestly, my father's been walking on thin ice for a long time. I don't let him stay alone with my son. I don't trust him for more than an hour. When I got pregnant, I began encouraging him to start therapy. And finally, this June, he did. His attitude toward me and my younger sister, who splits her time between our divorced parents, has genuinely improved since then. I made it clear that if he quits therapy, I won't let him see his grandson. For the first time ever, my dad actually seems to be changing for the better. It's hard to stay optimistic, but I'm trying. And if I ever decide to go no contact, it definitely won't be because of damn Harold. That's about it, really. I'm relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore. Things with my father are still tense, but I'm not dwelling on it. My main priorities are my son, my fiancé, and my work, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Update 2. Last week, my fiancé, our baby, and I spent a few days visiting my cousin. On the day we arrived, we went with her to pick up her daughter, my little cousin, I'll just call her my niece, from school. When we got there, she was chatting with a boy. She saw us, gave him a friendly goodbye hug, oh the horror, and ran over to us. We talked for a bit, and then she immediately focused on my son, completely smitten. She grabbed my fiancé's hand and dragged him off to show our baby to our classmates while I waited with my cousin. A few minutes later, someone called out my cousin's name. It was the boy's mother. She walked over, pointed at my cousin, and snapped, "You need to teach your daughter some manners. She shouldn't be talking to my son, let alone hugging him. They're far too young for that. Then she turned around and left without waiting for a reply. For reference, both kids are 5. All he did was compliment her Shrek Crocs. Update 3. I checked someone's essay for grammar, and now that person blames me for getting a failing grade. Since high school, I've occasionally proofread friends' papers, mostly fixing grammar and making small tweaks. One friend didn't even understand what paragraphs were until college. I'm no professional, but I've always been decent enough that people kept recommending me. I graduated in 2019, I don't teach, don't study anymore, and don't charge money, I just do it for fun, though lately not so often. I have a job, a husband, and a baby, and most of my friends finished school years ago. One of the few exceptions was a close friend who recently decided to get a second degree. Last week's class had to submit a big written project, and he recommended me to a classmate. Let's call him Derek. He's 18 and sounded normal on the phone, though in hindsight I think he was probably high. He promised to send his paper at least 24 hours before the deadline so I could check it for grammar. Instead, he sent it at 1 a.m. the day it was due at 7:30 a.m. I was annoyed, but decided to keep my word. It was 3 pages long, and I immediately realized that at least half of it had been written by ChatGPT, badly. The facts were wrong, it even mixed up 2 completely different people, which ruined the entire section. But since it was 1 a.m. and the grammar in that part was fine, I focused only on fixing the truly awful mistakes in the rest. I sent it back within an hour. He didn't even thank me. Yesterday, Derek got his grade, 2 out of 10. His professor apparently said that was generous. Derek's reaction, he texted me, "What the hell did you do? You were supposed to fix everything." I reminded him that I only correct grammar, not factual errors. Both I and our mutual friend had told him that multiple times. He kept arguing that I should have rewritten the wrong parts since I noticed them. So basically, this guy submitted a half AI-written paper and now blames me for his failure. Judging by his messages, he actually expected me to rewrite chunks of the essay for him. The audacity. I get it. Being a student is hard. I've been there. But I would never treat someone who's helping me for free like that. Honestly, I'm seriously considering never proofreading anyone's work again. Update 4. A quick one, but it's about Harold. Hi, everyone. Can't believe it's been over a year since my last update. I meant to write sooner, but life has been hectic. Raising a toddler, getting married, working like crazy, and binge-watching Supernatural. So yeah, I've been busy. Avoiding Harold openly has worked beautifully. My father respects my boundaries. Every time he invites my husband and I for dinner, I ask who else will be there, and if Harold's on the list, he tells me honestly. He's never lied, and he doesn't insist if I say I'm not coming. Since then, I've only seen Harold once, at my father's birthday party a couple of months ago. Yes, I knew he'd be there. My dad promised to tell him not to talk to me. Plus, there were going to be kids there, children of my dad's friends, some of whom I used to babysit. I love those kids more than I hate Harold, so I went. I spent most of the evening with my son and the kids. Harold didn't speak to me once, so I guess my father kept his word, though I did notice Harold glance at us a few times, and my husband caught him too, and my husband, the calmest man alive, somehow managed to look intimidating in return. God, I love that man. But guess who did talk to me? Harold's new girlfriend. Yep, he's dating someone now. We crossed paths twice. First when she came over to coo over my son and told me he needed a haircut. Instant dislike. Later she came back and said, "You're shy, aren't you?" I said, "No." She laughed and added, "Oh yes, you are." She said it in that sing-song tone people use with 6-year-olds. I barely kept a straight face, otherwise I might have told her that I just preferred hanging out with kids who were far better company than her and her insufferable boyfriend. Honestly, they're perfect for each other. Not much else to add. My dad broke up with the woman he was dating last year, long story, and now he has a new girlfriend. She's not annoying or crazy, and honestly, I like her. Still, I'd bet their relationship won't last more than a year. Things with my dad aren't perfect, but they're better. He actually apologizes now. Maybe it's therapy working.
Or maybe motherhood just made me terrifying. Either way, I'm not complaining. And I have to admit, he's turned out to be a great grandpa. I'm genuinely happy my father continues to respect my boundaries regarding Harold. I don't need that man in my life at all. Right now, I'm content. My son's happy and healthy. Part of me misses when he was tiny, but I'm prouder of him every single day. Watching your child grow into himself, it's just the best feeling in the world.
I caught my girlfriend cheating with my closest friend, turned him over to the police, and cut all ties with her. My late wife, Rachel, and I grew up in a medium-sized town with around 30,000 people. We'd known each other since we were about 6 years old and were practically inseparable. By 16, we started dating, and when we turned 18, we moved a few hours away to pursue jobs. At 20, we got married and bought our first house. 2 years later, she became pregnant with our son. That's when tragedy struck. About 5 weeks before her maternity leave, a massive shelving unit at her workplace collapsed on her. I was told that she and our unborn baby were killed instantly. 2 of her co-workers were also caught in the accident. One was left paralyzed, and the other lost a leg. The cruel reality was that her employer had chosen to keep using old, unsafe storage racks to save money instead of replacing them. To this day, I can't forgive the executives and managers responsible. They stole the love of my life and ended my child's future before it even began. Not long after, the company offered what they called a settlement. To me, it was nothing but blood money. They wanted to avoid a lawsuit, but I wanted justice. Thankfully, the case gained media attention, politicians got involved, and the trial was fast-tracked. Within 3 years, the payout was nearly 10 times what they initially tried to offer. Several executives were fired, fined, and some even ended up in prison. During this time, I continued working at my telecommunications job. My mother, God bless her, moved in with me to help, and honestly, I don't think I would have survived that period without her support. Around the same time, I was offered a promotion that required frequent travel across the state. Instead, I requested to be based out of my hometown branch so I could both cover statewide work and be close to my roots. They agreed. Eventually, I bought a house there, which allowed me to have my own space without constantly crashing at my parents' place whenever I came home. 4 years passed. One Friday, after returning from a work trip, I was catching up on tasks in my office when Harry, the branch director, stopped by. We had grown up in the same town, though at different schools, and after my return, we became close friends. He invited me to a party at his place that evening. It was last minute, but I agreed. I felt like I needed a night with friends. That night, Harry introduced me to Catherine, a new employee who had just relocated to the area. We clicked instantly. As cliché as it sounds, she reminded me so much of Rachel it was uncanny. 2 years of dating later, Catherine moved into my home. Everything was going well. She got along with my parents, Rachel's family approved of her, and for nearly a year, life felt normal again. Then things started to shift. Our video calls during my trips became shorter. Neighbors mentioned seeing a car, one that matched Harry's, parked behind my house when I was away. I even noticed clothing in the closet that wasn't mine. Every sign pointed to betrayal, but when I confronted her, Catherine insisted it was innocent. She claimed Harry occasionally stopped by to discuss work matters and never stayed the night. I convinced myself I was just paranoid and tried to move on, though deep down the doubt lingered. 6 months later, the truth hit me in the face. I had just closed a major deal and the negotiations wrapped up earlier than expected. Instead of staying out of town, I booked an earlier flight home, wanting to surprise Catherine. A few hours later, I arrived in my hometown. Rather than pulling into the driveway, I parked in the alley behind the house, hoping to sneak in and give her a happy surprise. But part of me wanted to see if that mystery car was really there. And sure enough, it was. Parked directly at the back entrance was Harry's car. My stomach sank. For a split second, I hoped maybe it belonged to someone else, a careless neighbor perhaps,
but the license plate confirmed it was his. My pulse skyrocketed as I stepped out, walking toward the rear of the house. And that's when I saw something that made my heart plummet. Time froze when I walked into my own kitchen and saw my closest friend having sex with my girlfriend on the counter. My mind went blank. 1,000 questions swirled inside me. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Why were they doing this in my house of all places? Shattered, I turned and slipped away unnoticed. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, tears running down my face. But grief quickly gave way to rage, the same kind of fury I once felt toward the people responsible for Rachel's death. Only this time, I had no intention of using violence. I considered myself a pacifist, but I knew I could still ruin their lives in a different way. I reversed down the alley, far enough to keep Harry's car in sight, then drove back near the front gate where I could watch the house. I called Catherine. They were still going at it when her phone rang. I watched them pause, glance at the screen, and exchange looks when they saw my name. She hesitated but didn't pick up. Seconds later, they resumed. I dialed again. This time, she answered. I hung up immediately. Moments later, she called me back, asking why I was ringing so late. I told her I'd be home in 10 minutes and didn't want to scare her by showing up unexpectedly. She faked excitement, said she was glad I was coming home, and quickly ended the call, claiming she needed to change clothes. Not long after, Harry bolted out the gate half-dressed, leapt into his car, and sped off like the devil was chasing him. I couldn't help but smirk, knowing I had terrified them both into thinking they'd been caught. I waited a few minutes, then parked where Harry's car had been. The rest of the night went quietly. Once she was asleep, I slipped into my office at the end of the hall, wide awake. I needed a plan. My mother had always taught me to let karma do its work, but this time, karma was going to get some help. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of their lives. I knew Harry was into substances, nothing hardcore, but enough to ruin his career if exposed. I'd stumbled upon some powder and weed at his place once, though he tried to cover it up. I pretended not to notice then, but now it was exactly what I needed. I began contacting shady clients and made several purchases, building up a stash over a few weeks. Soon I had more than enough to execute my plan. A month later, I hosted a barbecue for friends, Harry included. Once I made sure he had drunk plenty, I convinced him to crash at my place. Early the next morning, I planted the stash and some of my personal belongings inside his car, the largest amount hidden under the spare tire compartment. I also slipped a smaller stash into his home later when I dropped him off too drunk to drive himself. Days later, I staged a burglary. I smashed the glass in my kitchen's back door and left it ajar before heading to the airport. When my plane landed, I had several messages waiting. One from my panicked mother, who discovered the broken door and called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from local authorities asking me to return their call. I told the police I was away on business and would speak to them once I got back. In the meantime, I asked Catherine to stay at my parents' house until I returned, and arranged through my father to have a security company install cameras and an alarm system. When I came home, I acted the part. Shocked, confused, and upset. How could this happen? Who would want to break into my home? After a police walkthrough confirmed missing personal items, I filed a report. The security rep then showed Catherine and me how the system worked. She nervously asked what to do if we wanted privacy while being intimate. He assured her it was a common question and showed how to disable cameras in certain areas. As I escorted him out, I asked him if he could also set up email alerts for whenever the cameras were switched off. He happily obliged. Perfect. All I had to do now was wait. Meanwhile, I quietly consulted a family lawyer. I needed to be absolutely certain that when the time came, I could legally walk away from Catherine without paying her a cent or splitting any property. Since I wasn't entirely sure whether Catherine and I could be considered common-law partners, I wanted to make certain she'd never have a legal claim to anything that once belonged to Rachel and me.
As Rachel's sole heir, the last thing I needed was a legal ambush. Thankfully, my lawyer assured me. Despite nearly 4 years of dating, Catherine and I hadn't lived together long enough to qualify as common-law spouses. On top of that, since I paid all the bills and she had never contributed toward rent, she had no financial or legal grounds to demand anything. To cover every possibility, though, he drafted what felt like a bulletproof document just in case she ever tried. The following week, my company offered me a promotion with a relocation back to the city. It meant leading a team, and more importantly, no more endless travel. The move would take about 6 weeks, plenty of time to collect the evidence I needed. Back in my hometown, I set the final stage of my plan in motion. I asked Harry to approve a week off for Catherine in about 2 weeks' time. I told him I wanted to surprise her with a vacation before taking the biggest step of my life again. He jumped up, hugged me hard, congratulating me for being ready to commit once more. I hugged him back, though not for the reason he thought. He agreed to block off the week, and I asked him to keep it quiet so it would be a surprise. Of course, I knew word would spread in the office. That was part of my design. That evening, I told Catherine I'd booked her and 2 of her friends a week-long spa retreat, all expenses paid. She squealed with excitement, like a child let loose in a candy shop. I then told her I'd be busy in the city preparing for a big client meeting and would fly out, not returning until after she was already gone. She looked a little disappointed, but I assured her the surprise would be worth it when she came back. What I didn't tell her was that I had quietly arranged a 2-week getaway for myself on the other side of the country, both to enjoy a taste of freedom and to brace myself for the storm that was about to break. 2 Sundays later, I returned and drove past my house. Sure enough, Harry's car was there, just as it had been the first night I caught them. I parked a little farther away and checked the cameras. They were asleep in my bed. No shock there. I already had 2 weeks' worth of recordings of them together. That's when I made my first call. Pretending to be a concerned neighbor, I told the police there was a man loitering in his car behind my property, occasionally handing things through car windows and peering into my yard. I said I suspected he might be dealing or planning a break-in. I gave them his license plate and vehicle description. They promised to send someone. Then I phoned Catherine, saying I'd be home in 10 minutes. I reminded her that although she was flying out the next day, I wanted to surprise her now. Watching the footage later, I laughed at the chaos I'd set off. Within seconds, Harry bolted shirtless out the back door and scrambled into his car. I couldn't have scripted it better. As he sped off, a police cruiser turned down the alley and immediately began pursuit. Perfect timing. I parked, greeted a very flustered Catherine, and played the part of the loving partner. We did the usual couple routines, then she fell asleep. I, of course, stayed awake. The next day, a taxi came to take her and her friends to the airport. Once they left, I waited a few hours, then called a friend in the moving business. I asked him to help me box up Catherine's belongings and put them into storage that Friday. He agreed. Later that day, the police called. They wanted me to come identify items seized from a suspect the night before, items that matched the list of stolen property I had reported. I smiled, realizing my setup for Harry was now in motion, and told them I'd come by soon. When I arrived, not all of my missing things had been found yet. They were likely still at his house, awaiting a full search. But it hardly mattered. In a town this small, gossip spreads faster than fire. Harry was already disgraced, and within days he was fired outright for drug possession and stolen goods. That same evening, the company's executives formally apologized to me on behalf of the firm. Afterward, I went to my parents' house and explained what had happened, leaving out a few of the uglier details, and told them, as well as Rachel's parents, that I'd accepted a promotion and was moving back to the city, but without Catherine. They were disappointed I hadn't confided in them sooner, but relieved to see I hadn't stooped to her level. They gave their blessing to my plan to simply vanish from her life. After a long night of drinks, laughter, and a few tears, I returned home. By Friday afternoon, after a grueling week of lining up cleaners, preparing the house for rental, and closing tasks at the local office, I packed up a few last items, stopped at my parents' to say goodbye, and then made one final detour. Becky, one of Rachel's closest childhood friends, had been my quiet accomplice. She was the only person, aside from my lawyer, who knew the truth, though I spared her the details about Harry. Without her help, I couldn't have pulled things together so quickly. I handed her a large envelope containing everything: video evidence of Catherine's affair, a personal letter, and legal documents drafted by my attorney forbidding Catherine from contacting me. It also included instructions on how she could retrieve her belongings from the storage unit I had rented. Becky promised to deliver it when the time came. Then I drove back to the city. On Sunday morning, I woke to a flood of missed calls, voicemails, and angry texts. Catherine had cut her trip short after hearing something had happened back home, only to find an empty house with a "for rent" sign planted in the yard. In a panic, she rushed to my parents' house. They closed the door in her face. She called around frantically until finally reaching Becky and learned about the envelope. As expected, she didn't take it well. Soon the messages began pouring in, furious accusations that I'd set up Harry, threats, pleas, everything in between. I half expected her to show up at my door in the city, but she never did. Now, to answer the questions people always ask, what happened to Harry? He's facing a few months behind bars. Since it's his first offense, he'll likely serve less, but I don't regret it. He grew up with Rachel and I, knew exactly how shattered I had been after losing her, and still chose betrayal. The police already had plenty to work with. All I did was give them a reason to look closer. What about Catherine? She fancied herself a socialite. Her status meant everything to her, and exposure was the only thing she couldn't survive. Word of her affair spread quickly in a small town. Her reputation was destroyed, and last I heard, she'd moved to another state because she couldn't handle the fallout. Was it legal? Surprisingly, yes. I covered every base with my lawyer. I had every right to move her belongings into storage, to cut her off, and to disappear. Morally, I know it was cold. I dangled what she thought was the happiest moment of her life, only to turn it into ashes. But that was the point, to let her feel the collapse I had felt once before. And finally, to those who think I'm lying, chasing internet clout, or that I'm some kind of sociopath, believe what you want. Stories like mine could happen anywhere. And as for labels, well, in this day and age, who doesn't have a touch of madness in them?
A woman treats her husband like trash, cheats on him, divorces him, and only 6 months later begins to regret everything. If I could give anyone advice about divorce, it would be this: don't throw away your marriage over petty reasons. If your spouse is abusive, threatening you or your children, then yes, leave and never look back. But if not, think twice. In my case, there was no violence, no danger. We had been together for 8 years, and most of that time was genuinely good. We shared 4 children together. About 5 years into our marriage, I got a big promotion at work. That's when things started to shift. Suddenly, it felt like my husband was holding me back. I began to see him as an anchor, weighing down my potential for a better life. We had never been wealthy, and when my salary surpassed his, my resentment grew. I worked longer hours while his schedule became shorter. He spent more time at home with the kids, and instead of appreciating that, I despised him for it. I'd come home to dishes not washed, meals not cooked, or the kids already in bed, and I would explode. He promised to do better, but I never saw his efforts as enough. Over the years, the gap between us widened. The more he stayed home, the more I criticized him for not bringing in money. When he offered to take extra shifts, I snapped at him because it meant less help with the kids. No matter what he did, I always made him feel wrong. Deep down, I wanted him to hurt. And then, I met another man at work. At first, it was harmless, just chatting, laughing during breaks. Then it became texts, photos, videos, and eventually meeting alone. I knew it was wrong, but it made me feel alive. My husband hadn't made me feel that way in years. One night, I came home to find he had cleaned the entire house, cook dinner for the family, and even set up a movie night. A few years ago, that would have melted my heart. But that night, I couldn't even look at him. I pretended I was sick and went to bed. He doted on me all evening, bringing me food, checking my temperature. Instead of softening me, it made me furious. I was texting the other man before the night was over. After that, nothing he did was enough. I picked fights, pushed him to the breaking point, waited for him to snap. He never did. Instead, after every fight, he apologized, even when he had done nothing wrong. I, on the other hand, never apologized. I made sure he felt smaller, weaker, undeserving. When he eventually discovered my affair, I acted cold, like it didn't matter. Inside, it tore me apart, but I refused to show it. I saw his face break, saw him struggle not to cry, and in that moment, instead of compassion, I told him I wanted a divorce. It was like I could hear his heart ripping in half. He begged, pleaded, said we could work through it. But I didn't care. I ended things with the other man, not out of guilt, but because I knew I could always go back if I wanted to. Meanwhile, I kept tormenting my husband with constant criticism, never letting him breathe. I convinced myself I was right, that the whole internet was on my side, validating my anger. Eventually, I met with a lawyer. A couple of weeks later, I filed for divorce. The process was simple. He didn't fight me on money, on custody, on anything. The only thing he asked, the only thing was for me not to go through with it, to give our marriage another chance. And I still left. I didn't care at the time. He was broken, but I felt free. Free to do whatever I wanted, without guilt, without accountability. For a moment, it was intoxicating, that feeling of freedom, but it didn't last. Within the first month after he moved out, reality hit me hard. I forgot trash day 3 times in a row. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink, laundry sat untouched for so long, I started sniff testing clothes to see if they were wearable. And my kids, I had never seen them so unhappy. My oldest daughter had seen some of the messages I exchanged with the other man months before, and she knew her father still wanted to fix our marriage. She stopped talking to me, except to ask when she could visit her dad. The younger ones, too, said they'd rather live with him. I tried to buy their happiness, toys, games, little distractions, but their joy lasted minutes at best. They wanted their father. Work became another battlefield. Alone, I couldn't keep up with the extra hours that had once made me feel powerful. I caved and began calling my ex, asking him to watch the kids. Every single time he showed up. He'd clean the dishes, do the laundry, sometimes even cook dinner. When I came back, he rarely spoke to me. Just a quiet, "Call me if you need something." And then he'd leave. Always looking so heartbreakingly sad. A couple of months later, friends pushed me to go on a date, dinner and a movie. I thought maybe it would be a new beginning. But halfway through dinner, guilt crashed down on me like a tidal wave. It was unbearable. I skipped the movie, went home, and cried for days. That's how I ended up on a therapist's couch. I poured everything out, from the promotion at work to the divorce papers. The therapist listened and then told me plainly, I wasn't right. The justifications I'd clung to, the support I found online, all of it. Lies I used to excuse myself. I kept going back, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. I argued, I tried to prove I had been right all along. But the more I spoke, the more the truth became undeniable. I was the one who destroyed us. My flaws, my cruelty, my pride, they outweighed everything. I had said and done things so vile, even I wouldn't want to live with me. Yet he had. He wanted to. I'll never forget the day he begged me in front of the lawyer not to go through with the divorce. He was still fighting for us, even as I was signing our life away. And then I bragged about it online like it was some kind of victory. I was so wrong. Just a few weeks ago, after he had come by to help with the kids, I walked him out and asked if he'd ever consider coming back. He looked at me, tears filling his eyes, and said he didn't know if he could. The pain had been too long, too deep. He admitted that what hurt him most wasn't the cheating or even the divorce itself, but the way I sighed of relief the moment the papers were signed. He thought his love was enough before it was too late, but I didn't. And now, he doesn't know if he'll ever be able to trust me again. I can't blame him. Looking back, he was a wonderful husband, and I destroyed him. I robbed my children of the amazing father they had. I thought I was chasing happiness, freedom. Instead, I'm spending my freedom either alone at home or sobbing in therapy sessions. Please, if you're reading this, don't romanticize divorce just because the internet makes it sound liberating. Before you give up on your marriage, take a hard look at yourself. Ask if there's something you can change. That goes for both men and women. Divorce doesn't guarantee happiness. Freedom doesn't guarantee peace. And watching your husband and children suffer because of your choices, that's the deepest pain I've ever known.
My ex-wife cheated on me, then tried to become a copy of my new girlfriend after her lover cheated on her. My ex-wife, she's 48 and I'm 47, left me for a man who was actually married to her best friend from high school. Yeah, great friend. We've been married for 20 years, and I thought we had 2 kids together. Recently, I found out the younger one isn't biologically mine. She's his. My ex knew it from the start and kept it secret all these years. My name is still on the birth certificate, though, and I plan to fight for custody because that little girl is my daughter, not by blood, but by everything else that matters. Apparently, their affair had been going on for a long time. Finding out felt like being punched in the gut. When I asked her to choose him or me, she said him. Why? Because, in her words, he can go for a second round right after sex. That was it. That was her reason. She didn't care that I worked 2 jobs to pay for her college, that I gave up my dream of becoming a musician so she could stay home with the kids. Kids she was cheating on me around. She and the kids were my entire world, but she was never an easy woman to live with. She's bipolar, and life with her was a constant storm of anger and emotional abuse. I used to tell myself she couldn't control it, but later I learned from her own friends that sometimes she hit me simply because she felt like it. My kids saw it all, her screaming, her hitting me, and I just stood there, never fighting back. I hated that they had to witness that. Once, near the end, she snapped because I didn't take the trash out the moment I came home. She grabbed me by the throat and started choking me, right in front of our son. I managed to say, "He's never going to forget this." That's when she finally let go. Looking back, I should have left years earlier, but I stayed. For the kids. I thought I was protecting them. When the truth finally came out, she sat across from her best friend, the wife of the man she'd been sleeping with, and said, "Yes, it's true. No, I'm not sorry." Then she just got up and walked away. She moved out, took the kids, and moved in with him, in an apartment just down the street. Even then, I hoped she'd realize that the grass isn't greener. After all, this guy had cheated on his wife before, several times, and she knew that. I waited that entire first year thinking she'd come back. She even kept a spare key to our place, and I thought maybe she held on to it because she knew she'd return one day. But by the end of that year, things got ugly. Her new boyfriend would show up at the bus stop when I dropped off the kids for school, saying, "I came to say goodbye to my daughter, not yours, mine." I told him, "Then why were you fine letting her raise her for the past 5 years? Why did you let her take my last name? Why was I there for her birth while you were nowhere around?" He nearly hit me. That same night, they both came to my place drunk because he wanted to fight it out. My ex made it public, bragging all over Facebook about her new man. Our mutual friends saw it and immediately reached out to me and his wife.
Of course, I took screenshots. She didn't seem to care that she was ruining her image before the divorce was even finalized. But honestly, why would she? By then, I had already confronted her with the paternity test results. For a while, I was destroying myself mentally, wondering what I could have done differently. She accused me of not being there, but how could I be when I was working 2 jobs to just keep us afloat? I'd come home exhausted, the house a mess, walls covered in crayon drawings, blinds ripped down, and she'd still scream at me for not taking the trash out. 16 hours of work a day, and that was her biggest problem. Eventually, I started to believe maybe it really was my fault, that I somehow caused it all. It took time, and my brother, to pull me out of that mindset. He forced me to join his band, said it helped me get my life back. I resisted, but he insisted, and it changed everything. I met some amazing people, started playing again, and eventually began dating a woman. 45, kind, warm, the complete opposite of my ex. For the first time in decades, I was in a relationship where no one yelled at me or threw things at my head. But my ex still had keys to our old place. She'd occasionally stop by to drop off things for the kids. One day, she walked in and found my new girlfriend there. It didn't go well. That evening, she called, furious, demanding to know who the woman was and why she was in our house. I told her calmly, my personal life stopped being your business the day you left. That didn't sit well with her. Over the past few months, she's gone completely off the rails because of my new relationship. She tried to friend request my girlfriend on Facebook, demanding she accepted so she could see who was around her kids. When my girlfriend refused, she called screaming that I needed to make her accept. My girlfriend took the phone and said, I don't owe you access to my private life. If it's about the kids, we'll handle it through messages or calls. After that, things got weird. Suddenly, my girlfriend started getting random friend requests from people who were all friends with my ex. Then, my ex began showing up at my house on weekends while I was at work, basically spying. One time, I was on the phone with my girlfriend when she whispered, your ex just walked in. When she asked what my ex wanted, the woman said she was just checking how much milk was in the fridge for the kids. My girlfriend told her we had everything under control, and she left. When I got home, I demanded she return the keys since she no longer lived there. She gave me a fake apology, then stole our son's keys to make another copy. Once our lease ended, my girlfriend suggested we move in together, mostly to get away from my ex's insanity. My ex tried to sabotage even that. She called the cops, claiming I was taking her stuff. When the officers asked her to name a single thing that belonged to her, she couldn't. Now, the kids stay with us every other weekend. They've told me their mom doesn't let them talk about what we do together. She doesn't want to hear it. But lately, she's been prying again, asking questions about our time. Honestly, it's just jealousy. We live by the coast, and when the kids are with us, we take walks by the ocean, play games, go to the aquarium. If they come home with prizes, she throws them away. And lately, I've noticed something strange. Whenever she drops the kids off, she looks almost exactly like my girlfriend. Same haircut, same color, same style. It's honestly disturbing.
Everything we do with the kids, she tries to copy the following week. If we go to the beach, she takes them there too. If we visit the zoo, she's suddenly going to the zoo as well. She finds out what we had for dinner, cooks the same thing, and even makes the kids tell her whose food they liked better. Last week, my son told me he wanted to live with us. He said, Mom's lost her mind. You can bet I'll be using that in court. And just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, she started sending me explicit photos out of nowhere. My girlfriend was sitting next to me when the pictures came through. I immediately told her I hadn't asked for them, that my ex and I never talked like that, and even offered to let her check my phone. She laughed, looked at the photos, and jokingly asked for my ex's number, saying she'd send some of her own just to show her how it's actually done. I called my ex right away and asked what the hell she was thinking. I told her my girlfriend saw everything and was furious. She claimed she'd sent them to the wrong person. Then my girlfriend chimed in, "Your name is the first alphabetically in his contacts, and your boyfriend's is at the very end. So who exactly were you trying to send them to?" The ex hung up immediately. Honestly, I have no idea what kind of game she's playing anymore. It's pure insanity. And just to clarify, my girlfriend didn't send her anything back. It was just a joke. She said she'd show her how it's done because those photos were laughably bad. Mirror selfies, no shirt, duck lips. My girlfriend just rolled her eyes at the lack of imagination. I don't live in the old apartment anymore. After I took back the keys, she used our son's to make herself a copy and kept breaking in. So I moved in with my girlfriend. The ex doesn't have access now. The kids don't have keys either for that exact reason. I'm currently fighting for custody. It's not easy since I'm not my daughter's biological father, but my name's on the birth certificate, which gives me legal rights. The ex has been prescribed medication, but I doubt she takes it. Whenever the kids come over, I check for bruises just to make sure no one's hurting them. Apparently, she even hit her boyfriend once, and he punched a hole in the wall, warning her that if she tried that again, he'd fight back. Comment: from what you've described, your ex sounds completely unstable, maybe even dangerous. You should talk to a lawyer and see about getting a restraining order. Update 1. Last weekend was my daughter's 6th birthday. It wasn't my scheduled time with the kids, but to my surprise, my ex asked if I wanted to have them for her birthday. Of course I said yes, and she even let me keep them for 2 extra days. I figured she and her boyfriend probably had plans and just wanted some kid-free time. But here's the weird part. This was the first time her boyfriend could have celebrated his own biological daughter's birthday, and instead, he just handed her off to me and my girlfriend. Tell me that's not messed up. Comment: he's a disgusting coward, the kind of man who got another man's wife pregnant. Don't expect him to act like a responsible adult. Keep a record of his neglect. It might help in court. Poor little girl stuck between terrible adults. Update 2. Looks like karma finally caught up to my ex. On Saturday night, I got a furious text from her saying I hope I was happy because I won. I know I shouldn't have replied, but I asked what she was even talking about. She sent a bunch of nonsense and then told me to go ahead and gloat, said I'd probably enjoy it even more since it's my fault something bad happened to her. I asked what exactly she meant, but instead of explaining, she went on a drunken rant about how all men are pigs and can't be trusted. That's when it hit me. She was drunk again, and her boyfriend had cheated on her. I didn't say a word. You can't reason with her when she's like that. I just read the messages, realizing she finally got what she deserved. She left me for my married friend, the same guy who'd already cheated on his wife multiple times. She was affair number 3. When I reminded her that the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." Well, turns out she didn't. She thought she'd be the one who'd change him. Guess not. When she ran out of insults for me, she turned her attention to my girlfriend, said I was ugly as hell and that I could have any woman, but chose a monster to replace her. My girlfriend is gorgeous, inside and out, and her ex clearly can't stand it. She's been obsessed, copying her looks, stalking her online, trying to provoke jealousy. Then she said something even more ridiculous. Claimed I didn't actually love my girlfriend because it's impossible to fall in love with the first woman you sleep with after losing me. We'd been separated for a year before I even met my girlfriend, and it took me a long time to trust again. That trust, she earned it. Then my ex accused me of being with my girlfriend only because I lost my old apartment and was mooching off of her for a place to stay. She said, "You're just pretending to love her because you're homeless." For the record, I had my own place, across the street from my ex. She intentionally rented nearby so I'd have to see her new boyfriend every day. When my lease ended, I moved in with my girlfriend and found work near her place. It was obvious she was trying to start a fight, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. And just when I thought her insults couldn't get dumber, she said, "I'm sorry I wasn't enough for you." God, I wanted to scream. You left me. Did she forget who walked out and replaced who?
She dumped me for a married man who cheats constantly. What a prize. Then she went back to insulting my girlfriend, saying we both knew deep down I still wanted her and that my girlfriend couldn't compare. That's when I'd had enough. I told her to contact me when she sobered up and turned off my phone. A few hours later, my girlfriend came home and asked what happened. I handed her my phone and said, "Read it for yourself." She read the whole thing, laughed, gave it back, and said, "Looks like he cheated on her." I nodded, and she was right. She told me my ex's narcissism explodes when she's drunk, and that she's just angry she can't come over and sleep with me out of revenge. I haven't heard from my ex since.
I guess, like always, the next day she reread all her messages, realized what she'd done, and felt like an idiot. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. I'm so glad your new girlfriend just laughed it off. She sounds amazing. Definitely a huge upgrade from your ex. Yeah, my girlfriend's incredibly calm and grounded. It's strange, but refreshing. I got so used to my ex's constant explosions that this peaceful vibe still throws me off sometimes. You reap what you sow, man. Karma really knows when to show up. Just keep living your life. Looks like revenge really is a dish best served cold. Your ex sounds either completely toxic or straight up unhinged. Do you think that was a manic episode? I just hope the kids are safe. Can you get full custody? Yeah, I'm already fighting for custody. And I saved all those messages. Another reason why I didn't snap at her. My ex got cheated on by the very same guy she left me for. No surprise there. 3 days later, they were back together again. She literally has nowhere else to go. Now, she's stuck with him. Since then, apart from signing some divorce papers and the occasional text about the kids, I haven't heard a thing from her. And honestly, thank God for that. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. This Halloween, my brother's band got invited to play at a friend's annual event. They've been performing there for years. It's sort of a tradition now. My ex used to come with me before everything blew up, but last year she skipped it. That was around the time I found out she'd been sleeping with her best friend's husband and that my 6-year-old daughter was actually his child. This year, no one invited her, but she showed up anyway with the same guy she cheated on me with. I was furious. The event is strictly 18 plus, and she knew that perfectly well. I'm convinced she brought the kids just to get me kicked out. Security told her she couldn't bring children inside, but she stood there making a scene. Eventually, security came to me and asked if I could escort them out, and she immediately started yelling that I care more about some stupid party than my own kids. My friend, the event organizer, came over and said she could stay for 2 songs. Then she'd have to leave or he'd call the cops. I told him not to give in to her drama, but he said he was only doing it for the kids' sake. The night turned into a disaster. I was on stage most of the time, so I couldn't see what was happening in the crowd, but I heard bits and pieces between sets. Turns out my ex tried to start something with my girlfriend, and it did not end well for her. My girlfriend shut her down instantly and told her to stop using the kids as weapons. A lot of people saw it happen. When I finally got off stage, multiple people came up to me to explain what had gone down. My ex was glaring at my girlfriend from across the room, full of rage. And then, my daughter finished it off. She yelled across the whole hall, "I have 2 dads, my dad and mommy's boyfriend, who's my real dad." The room went silent. My ex turned beet red, hissed, "Thanks for embarrassing me," and stormed out. But my son refused to leave with her. He clung to me, crying, begging to stay. Her boyfriend eventually walked up to my girlfriend and asked if the boy could stay with us. She agreed, and even arranged with my friend to let him hang around until the end of the event. Later, we took him home with us. That entire night was pure hell. I must have apologized 1,000 times to my friend, my girlfriend, even my son, for dragging them into that chaos. I kept messing up songs during the set because my eyes were constantly scanning the crowd, terrified that another fight would break out. I didn't even know she had left the venue without her son until after our performance was over.
When I took him home the next evening, she made sure to avoid seeing me. Her boyfriend came out instead, said she knew I'd be there and didn't want to talk about what happened. Then he apologized for everything and started venting about how she behaves. I cut him off, told him I'm not interested in discussing her anymore. Later that night, my son called me saying they were fighting again, screaming so loud the walls were shaking. Apparently, her boyfriend had finally snapped. He told her she still wasn't over me and accused her of being obsessed with my life. According to my son, he yelled something like, "What pisses you off more, that he's moved on and you can't crawl back to him? Or that if you hadn't cheated with me, he probably would have left you for his current girlfriend anyway?" That's what started it all. I could hear them yelling in the background. I asked my son if I needed to come get him, but he said no. I stayed on the phone until things finally quieted down. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. The divorce is still not finalized, but I've moved on. I'm done mourning what I lost. I just want to get my kids out of that mess. And yes, I'm still fighting for custody. She's furious because she can't come back. If you ever hear them screaming like that again while you're on the phone with your son, call 911. Get those kids out immediately. Child Protective Services will at least remove them for the night, and one of those two will probably face domestic violence charges. She's getting exactly what she deserves. Cheaters are never truly happy. They live in the fog of their own lies, and when it becomes real life, all the ugliness surfaces. Your ex knows he cheated before and will likely do it again, but she's stuck with him now. She's drowning in the consequences of her own choices. Stay strong and keep making your girlfriend happy. She sounds amazing. He was married when she slept with my wife and at least 2 other women that I know of, and she knew about it. When I confronted her on the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." She really thought he'd change for her. Yeah, sure. And that's pretty much it. What do you all think? Do you believe cheaters are just lost causes, or can people actually change if the circumstances are right? Personally, I think there are 2 types. Those who cheat because they need the thrill, and those who cheat because they're miserable and stuck in the wrong situation. The first type will always cheat. The second might stop once they finally find someone who fulfills them. Which one's more common? Hard to say, but I'm pretty sure it's the first.